Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Tuesday, May 23rd, regular Board of County Commissioners work session, and we're going to start with a landfill signage update.
Great, thank you, George. I'm Brian Pettit, I'm the Public Works Director. I'm here with Kathy Hall, our Solid Waste Manager. And I think the last time we talked to the board was Valentine's Day about this proposal.
And I was having a baby.
There you go. And at that time, the board wanted staff to do a little bit more work on the proposal and get some comparators to the sign. And where this proposal comes from, I'll just hit it briefly, is really to give the traveling public and people trying to find a landfill a better idea of where it exists, and also give the community, give the landfill a sense of place in the community. We have more and more people accessing the landfill for reuse and recycling opportunities that are provided there. And it's not only for today. Once the landfill closes, this will continue on in perpetuity. We hope it to become a transfer station, a continuing place for recycling and reusing materials. So even when we're not filling the landfill with garbage, we'll be recycling and reusing things there. So with that, I'm going to give the presentation to Kathy so she can give you a better idea of what this sign will look like and how it compares to other signs that currently exist along State Highway 82.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So we do have two existing C-Dot place signs, both on the eastbound and westbound lanes of Highway 82. The photo there shows the one on the westbound lane. It's small, it's green, it's ugly, it's crooked, it constantly gets knocked over by snowplows. So a lot of times they end up missing, and then usually in the spring we have to go down the hill and find it and replace it. They're just not nice looking signs, and again, nobody sees them. They drive by us continually. So we are proposing this weathered wood plank sign. Has steel lettering, it's on a rock base, it's not lighted. It's total right now 10 foot long, 6.5 feet tall, 2 feet wide, so it's 132 feet square. And it would be in the CDOT right away. We would work closely with the Colorado Department of Transportation to make sure this doesn't inhibit their operations. And yeah, we think it fits in with the rustic rural nature of the community. It's a nice looking sign. And again, the size can be modified. The current county code requires 8 square feet, and that's front and back. That's nothing. So it would have to be a little larger than that. So we went up and down along Highway 82 because signs aren't uncommon. There are a handful of examples. So the first one along the way is Wildcat Ranch. That is right eastbound into Aspen on the other side of the landfill. It's a total of 378 square feet. Up next is the Snowmass Village entrance sign. That's 175 square feet. Continuing on down, we find the airport. Their sign's 175 foot squared. The Buttermilk Ski Area sign, 124 feet squared. The Inn at Aspen, 84 feet squared, and then the big one is the Aspen Business Center at 210 feet squared. So it's kind of hard to see with this light on the presentation, but we did a mock-up of a plywood sign. That would be the general dimensions of the sign we're proposing, and that is perpendicular to Highway 82. You can see there's 2 gentlemen, landfill people, standing next to it. And we also did one parallel to Highway 82 as an option, as a one-sided sign going along Highway 82. And that's right at the entrance as you turn off Highway 82. The road, the access road going up to the landfill is right behind them. So again, this is, we think it's a great idea just for wayfinding of the landfill, as well as really marking this solid waste center as a real asset to the community. We are increasing our diversion programs. We've seen 22% more vehicles coming across the scale and use at the landfill since 2013. We're on track this year to exceed, last year's numbers and vehicles across the scale. And we just want to talk to you today about getting your direction and have a discussion on the value of an entrance sign to the solid waste center.
So, Kathy, you're proposing just one sign that would be visible for people traveling east and west on 82?
Correct, if we put it perpendicular.
And I don't know, Brian, maybe you can know the history of how did the entrance to Wildcat Ranch get a sign that large?
I don't know the history on that, George.
I mean, it sort of makes sense that you've got some, certainly the entrance to a municipality like Snowmass makes sense, and a ski area and the airport, but the commercial signs, I'm just curious how they got approved. Not only Wildcat's a residential sign, the Inn at Aspen is a commercial sign. I'm concerned that we see a proliferation of these signages up and down 82. I could see other places wanting to have signs, whether it be the old Snowmass Conoco general store, and there's some other places as well. So I'm a little concerned about that. Patty?
Yeah, I remember the airport because that's not the first sign. The first sign was bigger, and we had complaints from the community that we had violated our own sign code. But we still are violating our own sign code. So did they have special use? I mean, there's special permitting provided for signs that violate the dimensions?
It was authorized by the board. I was here for the airport.
It came back to us, but the same
Issue.
thing with Buttermilk, the same thing with the ABC. They all had to come back in for that. And I think the Wildcat one, excuse me, is set back further, so that might have been an issue that they kind of put it not on their right of way, but in their own property. Because I remember the Snowmass sign we went, because I was the one who was not supporting it, went around and around. That was a long haul, but I think this is appropriate. I think it needs to be there because of the line of sight is also difficult sometimes coming through there, especially if you're in the right-hand of outside lane and there's traffic. You can't see those signs, or on the inside, you can't see where you need to turn. I think it would look nice there, and I know we'll probably hear about it from the community, so I think we need to be very clear that we looked at all these other signs and we felt that this was an appropriate sign in place.
Other comments? Greg?
I was just looking at that Wildcat sign, and if you look at it, the letters are actually look like they appear to be much smaller. The rock itself is however many square feet you describe it in front view, but the lettering is kind of small. So I'm wondering about text size. Is it a matter of text size rather than square footage of the background it's on?
It's the square
Text size and contrast. My feeling is just because there are other signs that are in violation of the sign code, it shouldn't be a reason to make this one violate the sign code. Did it shrink at all since our last meeting?
No.
No. Okay, I didn't think so. I think it's too big and it's too much, personally. The one question I had about it was when the landfill closes, we'll revise the sign to say compost and recycling, or whatever other services you're offering that could be modified easily enough so that that's not a big issue. I was driving down there the other day and I saw that little green crooked sign. I can't say I was totally charmed by it, but it didn't bother me. So my feeling is that I think it's a little bit bigger than we need still, and you know, it does remind me of the efforts to remove signs back in the day, and I'd still like to honor that somehow.
Can you put on that screen, can you put the proposed landfill sign along with these? Are you able to do that or not?
Probably not.
Or at least one of them, just so...
You just go between.
Yeah, look at the size of the text on the one on the left. It's pretty small.
Yeah, you can't read it, so
This
it
one's
kind of
huge.
violates
Now here's the
the...
question: if the snowplow goes by, is it going to plaster this one, or is
Well,
it far
that's
enough?
what we'll work with CDOT on to make sure we're further back that it won't affect them.
I mean, it seems to Greg's point, if you got a lot of verbiage on that, and it seems like we could perhaps shrink the size and cut out some of that verbiage as well, or but still have it. If your concern is to have people find the landfill, I kind of have a hard time. Maybe even 20, 30 years ago, people always found the landfill, and now you've got GPS, you've got MapQuest. I mean, it's so easy to find specific locations, but I just wonder if you looked at not necessarily reducing the size of the script, but eliminating some of it as well, that would be able to make that sign a little smaller, but still address your concerns and needs.
So are you suggesting taking out landfill and recycling?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
That's the only verbiage you could really take out, because if you took out anything else, you would mean not needing a sign.
Well, you could take out Pickens County as well.
I think Pickens County should be on there
Yeah.
myself.
All right. Those are my comments. Steve?
I disagree with the way that the square footage is calculated, because it's a sign that's 6 by 10 or it's basically 67 square feet you're looking at right there.
I counted the sides
You're-
as well, yeah.
Because it's 2 feet wide, you're doubling the size of the square footage, and it's probably the same on some of these other signs too. So I think the numbers are a little bit misleading, that this is sort of
132 cubic
eight,
feet.
maybe
Cubic feet,
8
yeah,
times bigger than the allowed.
When
But
it's
I agree.
two-sided, you have to count both sides in your total square footage.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that doesn't make sense. The sign is 67 square feet. That's the dimension of it. And maybe our sign code needs to be reworded. But I agree with you, George, that we could, cut down on the size of it, the size of the lettering a little bit, and it would still be very attractive, and, maybe cut some of the words out. And make the sign, just shrink it down a little bit instead of 10 by 6, 8 by 5 or something, maybe would work fine. But to me, it's very attractive. I like, I think it would be appropriate. It looks similar to the other signs that are up and down. We don't have Bugsy Barnard with
Chainsaw.
demolition saw to go in and
Cut down buildings.
cut it down.
He has kin around here.
Greg?
I did want to point out, I am, having taken the tour and drunk the Kool-Aid that Brian's given me on the Waste Center, I'm completely on board, and I appreciate so much what you're doing up there. And, the composting operation as a profit center what a great idea, and it seems like there's potential to grow that. And I know there's so many good things happening there, and we need to acknowledge that, and we can certainly be proud of it. If we could make the smallest discrete sign possible that would do that, I think I'd be on board. That's my big feeling. So how small can we make it is my question.
Patty?
I think if you just want to minimize it a little bit, I don't want to make it so small that there's no point in having a sign there, because it defeats the purpose of doing it. And if you've ever really spent a lot of time along there's a lot of people that turn around and come back, go in either direction. People, for some reason, just don't. It just surprises them that it's there. So I think it looks great. It fits in with the snowmass sign, with the airport sign, and with the Wildcat sign. But so I think if you just minimize it, so it's just not as solid and big, that I'm fine with it.
So I guess what I'm hearing is come back with a different version, a little more compact, maybe a little less verbiage. See what that looks like. And I wonder if we could see some sort of mock-up somehow, either there, so we could see it. If you could just leave it up there, so if we're traveling up and down the valley for a day or two, we could see how it looks. Or I don't know how. I mean, but it's hard. Whenever I always say this for when a developer comes in, right? When you look from blueprint to brick, all of a sudden people go, "Wow, I didn't realize that." It was
Or a
gonna look
driveway
like that.
cut, yeah.
So,
Well, and just to make sure we're meeting the expectation on mock-ups, say we do shift to a 8 by 5 size, which was proposed. If we just put some plywood up showing that 8 by 5, would that satisfy the need to provide a mock-up for you to see?
worked for me. I don't know.
I
the
think
rest
that's a
of
good
the board.
idea. And,
Okay.
and I don't have a problem with having landfill and recycling on there, because some people don't know that you can actually go there to recycle. And I don't think, as long as we could make it more compact,
Okay.
I think it'd be great.
And well, not to add more verbiage, but if you're composting, is that included in something there,
Recycling.
I wish we could just take out solid waste and call it the, composting and recycling and center.
So we have lots of different ideas, so let's see how we can clean it up, simplify it, and still be able to address your needs and concerns.
I did want to throw out that you could do the Burma shave style signs where there's one every 100 yards that has a poem leading up to the turnoff.
And there's one of those going into Steamboat Springs about that place you can buy Western wear.
Right.
So we'll develop a mock-up at 8x5, place it, notify the board that we'll have it up for a week, and then come back after that with the proposal formally to the board.
Would it be a huge effort to do even smaller, like just the smallest one you dare do, and show us that as a mock-up? Just to see, because 8x5 is still pretty big, in my opinion. That's a big sign.
It's going to look just fine.
Steve?
Two other things. If you could get a copy of our sign regulations, just a written thing, so we could see what the sign code says. Maybe there's other things we're not aware of in the sign code, perhaps. Also, if we could somehow have this picture overlaid on the buttermilk sign and different ones with little dotted lines on the different signs, like superimposed on that, so we could compare.
The size.
Because we look at the individual pictures and you sort of get an idea, but that would give us a better comparison.
Okay.
All right, got enough information?
Yes.
Hopefully not too confusing.
No, that's
Very
good.
smaller, simpler.
My only concern about comparing it to the other signs is, are we setting a new standard? Like this is what it's supposed to look like. If we're going to say, well, it looks like buttermilk and it looks like snowmass, so we should.
No, I would want to make it smaller than them. That would be the goal.
Yeah.
That's setting the standard, is we're making
Reduction, right.
a reduction in size from
Let's
what.
go knock over the ABC sign. That's too big.
I'll call John and let him know you're coming.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the round drawing board. Back to the.
Let's see, next we're going to have APSHA's recommended policies, the affordability and asset guidelines.
Looks like a dog one. It's coming along.
They have those in place for a particular reason, Mike, so,
You wanted to be able to see me.
yeah, I know, but
Sorry.
they're,
Oh, she's all right.
Or maybe I wanted a close-up of John. That's poor judgment.
We see enough of him.
Good afternoon, everybody.
How are you?
I'm great. How
who are you?
Oh, I will get, where's my, there we go. Pull up the PowerPoint. And let's see here. My name is Mike Gzdronsky. I'm Executive Director of the Aspen-Picking County Housing Authority. And thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to presenting to you Resolution Number 1, Series 2017. The APSHA Board of Directors recently adopted amendments to the Aspen-Picking County Employee Housing Guidelines, proposing changes to the category asset caps, and I think long overdue, in my opinion, and in the board's opinion. Look forward to getting into this with you and answering any questions at the end. Just at a glance, for you, and I know most of you already know this, but for the public out there who happen to be watching today, we oversee 3,000 deed-restricted affordable housing units within Aspen and Picking County. Of course, APSHA, as our acronym is intended to provide a critical mass of working residents for the city and for the county, employers, and for the community. And approximately right now, 53% of Picking County workforce currently commute from Down Valley into Picking County. As you know, in 2015, we did a study of the affordable housing guidelines and the program itself, and released that study in early 2016. And the key issues that were raised and that we're working from still today are program complexity and lack of transparency. So those are two critical issues that are facing the APSHA housing program. There are the consultants, the team of consultants also found that there are a lot of unintended inefficiencies within the system and inequities. We're not necessarily serving the target household markets that we originally wanted to or should. And third, it's also difficult to evaluate program performance, which limits learning, adapting, and improving the program over time. So the overriding conclusion, as you can see from the slide and from the 2016 policy study, is that a major overhaul of the program is warranted, and that minor adjustments and corrections are not sufficient to address the problems that have been identified. And this is not just something that has happened overnight. As you know, it's something that has evolved over 30 to 40 years. And so recognizing some of these substantial, if not structural issues to the program, let's head into why I'm here today and what I'm here to present. And this is kind of the lower hanging fruit as we see it, but it's a substantial change in many respects, and a positive one at that, I would argue. And that's proposed changes to the category asset caps. And the issues, as you can see from the list here and from the memo presented to the Board of County Commissioners with the existing current caps, is that, well, first of all, they disqualify approximately 36% of employee households working in Pickens County. And we're not talking about trust fund households. We're talking about, working households, people who probably, arguably could and should qualify. The asset caps were last changed over 15 years ago, back in 2002, so they've remained static over time. They disproportionately, the existing asset caps disproportionately impact income categories, creating inequities between target income households and categories. The existing asset caps are artificially low and are they in turn they're a disincentive to saving for retirement, college education, and other major life expenses like healthcare and childcare. They lack any definition or stated purpose and objective. They also lack any rationale or methodology for calculating them. And there's no rational nexus between asset caps and income limits. And finally, they unnecessarily add to the program's complexity, which not only increases administrative burden on qualifying applicants, but it also increases the cost to the taxpayers for us to administer. So the four proposed changes to the category asset caps we're presenting to the commissioners today under the call-up provision of the Intergovernmental Agreement. First is we want to establish and define a rationale for having asset caps in the guidelines in the first place. Secondly, we want to establish for the first time ever a methodology for determining what those asset caps should be. And third, we want to update asset caps for categories 1 through 7 and resident and occupied. And fourth and finally, by doing all these three things, we can eliminate Part 4, Section 2BC3, which is a provision in the substantial housing guidelines called the excess assets converted to income policy. We'll get into all this as we go along. The easiest one is establishing and defining a rationale. And so, as you can see in your packet and on the screen here for the audience as well at home, what we want to insert into the language of the guidelines is that asset caps test an applicant's, a buyer or renters need to purchase or rent a deed-restricted unit. They are intended to provide an equity-based solution to limit competition for scarce affordable housing units. They are meant to address higher asset, lower income applicants who might otherwise acquire free market or higher category housing. And why that is important to create and establish and define a rationale is that it's a ongoing basis for future policymakers, not only current policymakers, but future policymakers, to understand why we have asset caps in the first place. And so we're not banging our head against the wall wondering what's the purpose of having these in the first place. Secondly, establishing, like I said, for the first time in ever, a methodology for determining asset caps. And so I wanted the commissioners to understand that the APSHA board reviewed multiple options at the request of staff and also at the request of the board for a couple months. And the board settled on recommending a methodology using a multiplier of the maximum sales price for a single-family home, which is the highest priced unit type within each category. So this methodology would establish, the positive thing is that it would establish a direct linkage or a nexus between assets and incomes. It would actually be based on a sales amount, and that is, in other words, a newly deed-restricted sales price for a single-family home, and that would adjust annually. It wouldn't remain static, so that would automatically adjust each and every year. This methodology, what we like about it also is that it increases transparency, it increases public understanding, and it reduces program and administrative complexity. And also the multiplier used in the methodology itself can be changed based on what percentage of applicants the board or policymakers want to qualify for each category under the asset caps. So it's adjustable, it's not hard, fast, and it's rational. So we don't have to go through this again another 15 years down the road. But just to show you an example, which I think this chart clearly does, it shows the inconsistent changes to the asset caps over time. You can see in 1985, when the asset caps were first established for categories 1 through 4, it was $200,000 for every household. Now, keep in mind, category 5, 6, 7 did not exist at that time, nor did our RO. Not till later, as you can see, according to the chart. But you can look at, in 1985, it was $200,000 for low, moderate, and middle-income target households, and yet it's lower today in 2017. As you can see in the far right-handed column, that's the existing asset caps, and we're at $100,000 for Category 1, $125,000 for Category 2, $150,000 for Category 3, and $175,000 for Category 4, all lower than what they were back in 1985, 32 years ago. So really what it gets down to, let me see here, is that there's never been a real, not only hasn't there been a rationale put into place for why we have asset caps, but there's been no rhyme or reason relative to how asset caps have changed over time. What is clear, though, is that the asset changes have been inconsistent. We've had increases as high as 125% and reductions as much as 40% over the last 32 years. So all we can conclude from that is that changes to asset caps over time appear to be arbitrary, as this chart I believe clearly shows. So third is updating asset caps for categories 1 through 7 and for RO, using this new methodology for determining asset caps. So you can see there's 3 columns here associated with each category of ownership and rental and resident occupied. And so you see the current in column 2. And then we included what each and every one of those would look like based on an inflation adjusted scale based on 2017. You can see it's clear each and every category would substantially increase the asset cap if we had left that up to inflation. The proposed is much more modest, of course, because we still don't think the community wants to see asset caps beyond something that doesn't pass the smell test, so to speak. So the board had a lot of discussions surrounding the proposed asset caps using the methodology of multiplying a multiplier of the max sales price, as you can see in the far right column. it increases across the board, and it does it, I think, in a measured way and in a rational way, without concerning the community about allowing the quote-unquote trust funders from getting into the system. So, as you can see from your memos, this is Table 2 in the Affordable Housing Guidelines. It's the maximum gross income and net asset table for APSHA rental units. You're seeing nothing new. It's similar to what we just showed you, or I just showed you. That's it would strike the current net asset caps not to exceed and replace it with the proposed net asset caps for categories 1 through 4 and RO for rental units. And similarly, moving to ownership units, those are categories 1 through 4. And then I'll move on to categories 5 through 7 plus RO. And that's what it would look like. Those tables would be would be put into place into the APSHA guidelines as is. And then finally, the fourth, more of a housekeeping item, but it's a positive step forward in that if asset caps are increased to meet whatever goal the board establishes for having them and target audiences it wants to cater to, the excess asset caps converted to income policy can and should be removed from the guidelines. Removing this policy not only reduces administrative complexity, but also it reduces the number of high asset, low income type applicants from qualifying. So, and that's it's a little more technical, but it's basically by allowing asset caps to be at a level where that is more appropriate and doesn't exclude too many qualified households, you can get rid of this Band-Aid, because this is essentially this policy is essentially a Band-Aid to the current policy of having static asset caps. So with that, I'm trying to keep it a little higher level and not get too technical. I want to thank you for your time and answer any questions that you may have.
So, thanks, Mike. Two things. One is you note that there's a 1999 survey of employees within Pickens County determined the median household income for households with 0 and 1 dependent was $60,000. We have an update on that, don't we, John? Or we should have an update. That was 1999.
Well, so I think the methodologies might be different. I think this was a actual survey of incomes of folks who are living in the affordable housing program now. Is that correct?
Are we talking about from the 2016 policy study?
Well, I just wonder whether you're using some of this data when you came up with this these numbers, because again, it's 1999 survey.
No, we weren't using 1999.
Okay. Do we have
No, we have the
current?
2016 policy study did a
So we have current. That's what I
yes,
thought.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, from 2016 is what was in the study.
Yeah, that's the policy study did a substantial survey, the most extensive survey we've done of working households, Pickens County working households, whether they lived in Pickens County or lived out down valley. And we had almost 1,500 households respond to that survey.
Well, I think you definitely are going in the right direction. I was always concerned that you were penalizing, as you're trying to address people that were saving for the retirement, for the kids for college, for healthcare, whatever. They were being
agree.
penalized for that. So I never thought that was right. So that addresses that. But I'm just curious in terms of other assets someone may have. Let's say someone has a unit outside the APSHA area that we define, or other property interests, or even a rental unit. Was that discussed, or in terms of coming up with your top level of capital assets, or how does that fold in? How do you look at that?
You mean, if I'm understanding, if I'm not clear, I want to bite your question.
I have a housing a unit here through APSHA. but down in Rifle, I've got a rental unit. And so how does that,
So there is the ownership exclusion zone, of course, that we have, and that's all the way down Valley and along I-70 from Rifle to No Name. And so you can't, to qualify, whether as a renter or as an owner, you cannot own any other developed residential property in the ownership exclusion zone. So in that scenario, they wouldn't be able to qualify if they owned a rental unit.
they would not?
They would not, because they're in the ownership exclusion zone. Now, if they own something outside of
Let's
it,
say
maybe
they
that's a
live
better
in Junction.
example, say in Grand Junction.
Right.
Yeah, that's taken into account. And we're not changing the administrative policy of counting 60% of retirement assets. We only count 60% of retirement assets when qualifying households. But yeah, if they're getting rental income from something outside the ownership exclusion zone, say in Denver or in Grand Junction, we would look at that income, and that would certainly, well, that's on the income side, but of course, it applies as well as to how it affects their assets over time
Right.
and the wealth they've accumulated.
All right, so that's being taken into account.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there's always, and that's more of an internal administrative issue about what to count, what not to count as an asset, and HUD goes through that, and they, different organizations, whether it's Housing and Urban Development or the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, might have a slightly different definition, but we usually use their standards as well, or similar to their standards about what we count, what we don't count as an asset.
All right, thanks. Patty?
Yeah, I agree with George that I think this is a good way to go. You say you only include 60% of retirement. What about college funds? I mean, that to me is kind of near and dear to my heart, having put two kids through college.
Sure.
Do we exclude anything from the percentage of college funds that are?
You mean savings for college?
Yeah, if you save for your college kid, all that money you have in the bank for college counts towards your asset total.
I don't want to speak out of turn, and I don't know exactly the answer. I can get back to you on that.
I would like something.
But I believe we just exclude retirement. We don't make an exception. I feel like I'm about 99% right, but I'll double check.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't believe we exclude education.
Was there any discussion about that?
Sure,
'Cause
absolutely.
I would like that to be considered.
Yeah, because it's obviously it's associated with the discussion we're having today, but it's not. They're two different issues, right? What we count as an asset versus
Right.
what the asset cap should be. But that's a good issue, and I'm happy to take that back to my board of directors and let them know that is something, because they've had that conversation too
Yeah.
about we don't want to unintentionally penalize hardworking households in Picken County from saving not only for retirement but for their kids' education.
Because I noticed under the income and asset exceptions, it is only retirement accounts that are listed. So I personally would like that discussion to go further to see what the rationale is to not allow an exception for college funds.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think one of the challenges is if you have a retirement account, of course, it's a IRA or it's a 401k, so it's got parameters in terms of you can only use it for this, and if you take it out early, you get penalized.
Yep.
If you say, well, I'm saving $100 a month for my kid for college, and for whatever reason my kid decides not to go to college, or I need that money for some other emergency, that's
It depends on how you save, because there's some college funds you have to use it for college or you get penalized.
okay.
So it depends. If you're just putting it in your own little, piggy bank, it's one thing, but if you're putting it into a
Correct.
formal, so that could be part of the discussion.
I would agree with you. I think if it's in a defined college savings program approved by, allowed by the IRS or the state,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's something and just so I'm clear, you would like that to be.
I would like that to be considered just like the retirement account exception.
Yes, as an exception.
Yes.
Okay, good,
It's a 529 plan, maybe.
correct.
Good. Steve?
Let's see, a big question, I was having trouble understanding the Table 2 and Table 3. Could you explain how it works in terms of what is the differences between the ownership units and the rental units? Why is the income level less for the ownership units? than the rental
Which
ones.
tables? I'm sorry, I didn't bring my memo, but
Table 2 and 3. So it's the maximum gross income and,
is it what we're looking at here?
yeah. So this is for the rental units, and then the
Ownership.
table 3 is for the ownership unit.
And Steve, what is your question again?
Well, there's different numbers for the number of,
That's correct. It's those, and just that's why I clearly put on this. Those are for 0, 1, 2, and 3 dependents. Those are maximum incomes. So we qualify based on, right, two criteria, financial criteria, your income and then your wealth, your assets. And so it's a table that just shows incomes and asset restrictions side by side, so to speak, in the same table. So those, there's no relation right now between the two. Does
but
that
they are
make sense?
different figures. And I guess a rental unit, you're more liable to have 2 adults who are both working, or 3 adults who are all working at jobs.
Yeah, I mean, but this is
So maybe isn't a traditional family living in a rental unit, or is it?
it's hard to say. So we're gonna come back to you pretty soon in the near future about porting the system to area median income so that we can have a more sensible, rational approach on how we qualify on the income side of things. So this discussion is strictly about how we qualify on the assets vis-a-vis what's the most assets a household should have to qualify for that respective category unit.
Okay, and then if someone is applying, if they go over the threshold on either the asset cap or on the income level, then they're disqualified for that. Do you add
That's
the two?
yeah. I would say they just don't qualify for that particular category, but yeah, they're disqualified for that category. They're not allowed. They have to apply for a higher category if they exceed.
So you wouldn't add the income plus the asset cap figure?
No, there's no addition here. That's just side by side. There's no formula here, at least within what the numbers were showing you, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Those
I
are
was
just the
trying to understand how you.
That's a
use
good
the
question,
table.
and I want to be clear because those are the existing income limits under the existing guidelines, which we would like to change, and we will come forward and ask you to change in the near future. But that's a different discussion altogether. The problem with, as you can see now, one thing I'll point out. So if you look at the rental table here, you see adults in household, and then that's for the rental units. And then you look, if I scroll down to ownership units, dependents in household. We have a dual qualification system. We want, and this is not part of this discussion or these recommendations, but what we will be doing in the near future and bringing back to not only our board we have already brought it to the board of directors for APSHA, but to the elected officials, is to get rid of the dual qualification system. In other words, qualifying rental units based on the number of adults in that rental unit, and qualifying in case of ownership units, households on the number of dependents. The problem with having a dual qualification system that we currently have, it's discriminatory, and it violates the Fair Housing Act. That's the number one issue, and we need to change it as soon as possible. And what we'll go to is we want to basically qualify based on persons per household, regardless of whether they're an adult or whether they're a dependent. And that's what HUD uses, that's what Colorado Housing Finance Authority uses, that's practically what every housing authority and housing agency, not only in the state but nationwide, use. And so we're going to be making that recommendation to a single qualification system based on the number of persons per household, because we're effectively breaking the law, even though not intentionally.
Maybe I had a sense that something was unfair with that system or something.
Yeah.
And then you nailed it, I think, perfectly, that there is an inequity there that needs to be addressed.
There is, yes.
And I have one more question. When you use the multiplier, and then you kind of rounded figures off to the nearest.
Great question, yeah. Sure.
And why did you round them off?
That's a
Like,
great question. No, I
For
can-
instance, the category 1, you came up with 130,000.
That's right.
And yet, if you multiply, let's see, I was doing the math here somewhere. I came up with $130,500 using the 1.5 multiplier.
Yeah, so we rounded, that's a great question. So we used the 150% multiplier of the category maximum sales price for single-family homes, then rounded to the nearest $5,000 for administrative ease. Simple as that. It was just, we rounded these numbers to make it easy, just to whole
Easier for
numbers.
the public
Because then you
to-
would have, in not just that case, but you'd have different, you'd have different numbers, and we wanted whole numbers, whole rounded numbers. So we just, it was a rounding. It's a rounding, intentional
Okay.
rounding decision. So-
Okay, well, the reason and I'm sure members of the public are going to call you on that in terms of the transparency issue, because they'll say, well, you're using a 1.5 multiplier, and they're going to come up with these same figures I did, and then they'll ask the same question.
Well, but then, and I respect that, but we will very clearly say in the guidelines, because we even said it in our memos, it's rounded to the nearest 5,000 for administrative ease. So,
Well, I can understand that for making,
yes,
having it a more rounded off number is easier for everybody to work with.
yeah, just something. It's just simpler. Instead, and then when that number changes, we want whole numbers.
Okay. Well, that all said, with my questions, I mean, I agree with the process you're going through, and I agree with basically with the outcome you've come to also.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think that it makes sense that it get revised. Clearly, it's needed it for a long time. It's great to know that we're violating the Fair Housing Act and that you're trying to remedy that.
Not intentionally, but you know,
Intentionally,
and I think we're okay as long as they know we're working towards rectifying it.
Right. I'd like to ask a couple of things. One, looking at this, the households now will have additional adults or dependents, and it's going to be interchangeable. What are the unintended consequences, or what do you anticipate could be the next set of issues around that with, say, a single mom, a widowed mom with 3 kids trying to get into a place next to 3 adults or 4 adults trying to...
It actually makes it more fair. It's a different discussion. It's for the that's for the income discussion to come, and that's your question.
So coming down the road.
Coming
Right.
down the road, but
Same for rental units.
honestly, it's going to make it more fair. It's
Okay.
going to not only increase transparency, it's going to increase equity. And that's why it is a fair housing issue. Right now, we're unintentionally hurting families.
Right, okay, thanks.
Yeah,
The next one really was, do you see the number of applicants changing as a result of these changes? Do we see a change in the attractiveness or the barriers to entry coming down? Or-
Certainly the barriers to entry. I don't think I can't prognosticate if we're going to see an increase, because we certainly know based on the numbers we have that we're excluding approximately 36% of working households, Picken County working households, that could otherwise qualify. And so it would stand to reason that some of these folks will now compete, will say, hey, now I can compete. I mean, I'll use myself an example. I could probably now get into or try to apply. I'm not planning to do that, but just for full disclosure.
You might expect a significant increase in demand.
I don't know if we can say that. It's hard to say. I can't predict that. It certainly reduces the barrier to entry for those who could and arguably should qualify within the valley, who have been excluded because we've had this artificial capped and static asset cap in place for so long. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Applaud your efforts.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's trying to distill all this stuff to just
Yeah,
simple
and on
terms.
that note, it's the people who have been good with their money, who've saved money, invested their money, but who still can't afford to live in the valley, who will now be able to get into the lotteries. And I think that's the percentages that we've not allowed to come into this game that we're playing here. And so I think that's the good part of it, because the lottery numbers will go up, which probably won't make a lot of people who are already in the lottery happy, but it'll make it fair playing field for everybody who really, has done well with their dimes and their pennies and their nickels and put them away, and now they can actually, have a future here in the valley.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
So, Mike, explain the process. And I know when we established a new policy a year or two ago, we had the opportunity for a call-up. Just sort of explain that. Greg is new, and for the public,
Sure.
and then what happens if sounds like we want this to go forward, but so explain how that process works.
Sure. So there's an intergovernmental agreement between Picken County and the city of Aspen. We're in the 5th intergovernmental agreement, or we call it IGA in this business. And the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement, allows for the board, obviously the county commissioners and then the city council members to appoint members to the APSHA board as the policy-making body for APSHA. And so once the board of directors agree on a policy direction and pass a resolution, the elected officials then have the opportunity, they have 60 days once they've been notified, to call it up or to allow it to become part of the housing rules or guidelines and do nothing, or to call it up, hear it, and still do nothing, or to basically veto it and say, okay, housing board, you need to rethink this. We want you to look at this or that, and go back to the drawing board. So the intergovernmental agreement allows the elected officials, the contracting parties for APSHA, to be the final arbiters or the final authority on what rules are allowed to pass. Does that make?
Yeah, so with Patty's comments and concerns in terms of allowing a college fund to be considered as an asset, would we consider that as a call-up then?
No, and I think there's one. No, I wouldn't consider that a call up on what we. So, and this is one of the issues since to that question, I think there's a lot of things within the housing guidelines currently that are rightfully administrative. Even some of this, quite frankly, I'm not certain or convinced that a lot of the things that are in the guidelines should be in the guidelines as a matter of policy, political policy, if that makes sense. I think there are a lot of this stuff, I think, is, a lot of the machinations and the detail stuff is better left, quite frankly, for administrative decision making, because it's more expedient, and we don't have 15-year delays, for example, in the case of correcting this, right? So to that point, I would not encourage what is an asset or what constitutes an asset and what doesn't to become a political question, although today it actually is. So maybe back to your question, yeah, I think it is up. That's up for discussion, not necessarily for today's discussion, because it doesn't impact this proposed policy on what assets should be counted and what assets shouldn't be counted. But from my point of view as executive director of APSHA, a big reason for the complexity we face with this whole system is that what are rightfully administrative questions and concerns become political questions and concerns, and and that's when you look at the guidelines, that's a big document, and that makes it very difficult to change with one governing body, let alone 3 different governing bodies. When you have the APSHA board of directors and then the board of county commissioners and then city council all trying to act on the same thing and come to agreement on the same thing. So it's like trying to move a major freighter through a very narrow channel.
Yeah, but what I heard you say earlier was that in terms of the options, if we agree, we can just let it go forward. If we have some questions, or we want to add something to it or change something to it, then we would want to look at calling it up to make sure, because this is a policy, and you're asking us to accept the policy as it is, and we do have at least one of the concerns. So, John?
So, George, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think there may be two separate questions on the table. The proposal that's in front of you right now, or actually the policy that, per our new arrangement, has been approved by the APSHA board and now is being reviewed as to whether you want to call it up or not, really has to do with, are the asset caps appropriate? Another question came up, which I do think is a separate policy question of, well, what gets counted within those asset caps? I believe right now that simply the act of raising the asset caps as proposed provides some of the relief that the board is looking for. And so I wouldn't think that the board would necessarily want to call up this and delay the implementation of the asset caps, but as a separate matter, ask APSHA to address within the policy, which would be another one that would come back to you then, any changes in what is counted within those asset caps or not. Because right now, pending Mike's review of the guidelines there, the only assets that have a partial exclusion from that asset cap are retirement. The conversation today was, well, there are other kinds of assets that should be looked at. The prime example at the table was the college funds. There may be others, once the
HSA,
APSHA
could be like an
board-
HSA or...
Yeah.
I want that
those-
done. I don't want it to be 15 years before we address it.
Right. And so I think what I would suggest is that if the board is in agreement generally with the asset caps moving forward, is to let those move forward without the call up, and then to make a request that APSHA revisit the policy guidance concerning what should be counted.
Well, to me, it would make more sense to do it all at one time, but I understand the position. So as long as it gets looked at, and it's, like I said, not 15 years, I'd like that to, because it shouldn't be that big a discussion, to look at that.
And then, John, does this come back to us as a resolution, or no, we just...
No, so that's the change in the COP, and it was meant to streamline because it was taking so long, to Mike's earlier point about these changes going through, because they'd have to go through the three bodies separately, and if any one body made any changes at all, and we all like to edit from time to time, it would have to go back to the other two bodies for approval, and if they edited it, it'd have to go back to the other two. And so right now, as it stands, if the APSHA board has approved it and neither the city or the county call it up for revision, after 60 days it's deemed approved without further action.
So what I would like to ask, Mike, for you to do, you mentioned that you're going before City Council this evening.
Yes, sir.
So when you do your presentation, I would like you to include our request for the APSHA board to look at expanding what could be considered under assets such as college education or maybe an HSA. So, and that way you'll have an idea in terms of where they're coming from. Because if they're supportive of it, then it make it a little easier for the APSHA board of directors to pursue that, knowing that there's some consensus between the elected bodies.
And I want to be clear, you're not because when we say what we're counting as an asset, so we're going to count that. We don't want to count, when we count an asset, we count it against them, so to speak. So what we want to do is exempt, like we do 60%
under
or
your
40% of
exemption
retirement
section.
savings.
Correct.
We would exempt a portion, if not all, of education savings.
Based on the account that the savings are in.
Exactly, and by the way, and that was part and parcel to this overall discussion with the board of directors. But as we told our board then, they're two different issues.
Okay.
We didn't want to confuse asset caps with what qualifies or what makes up an asset itself.
Right.
But I'm happy to have that discussion. I know the board is happy to have that discussion too. And my only point about it's a little I think we need, happy to have that discussion. I think the bigger picture, what I would like you to think about is, should we be making that kind of discussion on what is an asset? Should that become a political question, or should that be an administrative question?
I think at this time, since it came from us, it should be a political question.
It is. Fair enough. Fair enough, it is, and that's fine. But I mean, for future reference, I think it is important, because I am going to come forward and probably in the near future, beyond, once we get this done, put to bed, and the income, reporting the system to area median income. But in terms of truly getting the entire affordable housing guidelines under control, I think one of the major questions we need to look at is what's rightfully a political question versus what's administrative, so that we don't have to keep coming back to you on minor modifications to the guidelines that we can make changes too easily and appropriately.
Can I just real quick?
Patty, then Steve?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but I just want to make sure that the public, the people who we are doing this program for, have the right to appeal, and it can come to the electeds. I say that about just about anything we do in the county. When there's a change and it's handled administratively, I think that's great. It streamlines the systems. It makes better sense. But if there's somebody who doesn't agree with one of those changes in the general public, they can bring it back to the electeds.
Well, I would respectfully disagree.
I want that available.
Only
'cause
because that's part of the complexity we have with APSHA today. That's part of the reason why we're in the pickle we're in. The complexity of the program is well beyond our control. And that's what we're trying to do, get it under control. And we do have that ability. I mean, the final arbiter for appeals is the board of directors. So it is quasi-political in that sense. It doesn't come back, I mean, under the guidelines or under the IGA, those appeals can't come back technically to the electeds. They come back to the board.
You do know that we're the ones who get the phone calls. It's
Well, I
not so
know.
much the members of the APSHA board, it's us.
And I'm
as
just
the
stating a
elected
fact, that's
phone
all. I
calls.
mean, it's the way the IGA is written, it's the way the housing guidelines are written. There is an appeals process to any decision administrative that we make. And the final arbiter of that, through you, indirectly, is the board of directors. Just because they can't come to, I just want to make it clear to the public, they can't come to you as a body.
No, not for-
They can come and speak
I
about it,
understand
but they
that
can't
part,
get it
but I
changed
just
through
want to
you.
make sure that there's an avenue for people who you may think it's a little tweak and it really affects people and they're not happy with it. I want to make sure that the people that this program is created for have the right to have a process.
Fair
And you're
enough.
telling me they do.
They
but
do.
we're the ones who gets the calls, so we'll just be calling you.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And there is a difference between administrative and political and
Yep.
political. And when there's any changes that come before the board of directors for APSHA, those changes and those policy changes, then, as we're seeing today, they need to come before the elected for approval or for call-up. So you have a process in place, and I don't think
We
we're
do.
trying to get into micromanaging at all, but I think there's a distinction when there's a change or new policy that's being recommended by the board of directors of APSHA, that becomes a political discussion.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that we've defined what's administrative change and what's a policy change. I'm not quite clear on that.
And what I would suggest, because we have really different topics on the table right now. We've got, the topic of the asset caps, which, I think we've got direction on, but I'm just going to just wrap up. I want to wrap up and make sure we're all in agreement that there's no call up on that. And then there's this broader question, I think, of, what needs to be policy decisions that are, set the guidelines and boundaries for the program that need to come back to what body. And that's almost, in my mind, a separate conversation that I think
Yeah, and I agree.
needs to probably bring back to all the bodies, in a sense. And I just don't want to confuse the two right now, because
I agree. I mean, when I started this conversation, it was just, the intention was as Mike is going to make a presentation before City Council, was just to be able to pass on some of our comments. and concerns and just leave it
Feel
at
them
that.
out.
Yeah, totally.
happy
And
to do
We
that.
just, we got
Yeah,
into a
right.
different
No, I
area.
understand.
Not
Just open
anyone's,
that door and I ran right.
Steve?
So one other question, is the figure, the 1.5% multiplier effect, can that be changed administratively? Like you might find out that all of a sudden everybody's qualifying and you have trust funders who are somehow slipping in and you want to adjust the multiplier to correct that? Or
No, the
would
way
you
it's,
have to come back
that's a great
to
question,
us?
Steve. No, actually, that would go back to the board. Because that is a policy question. I mean, I wouldn't want to have to make the decision independently or arbitrarily about, okay, we need to increase the number of Category 2 applicants, and so therefore we're gonna raise the asset cap there, but we're gonna lower the asset cap on everybody else. We may want to do that, but I would take that to the board and make the case, or anybody in my position should come back to the board of directors and make the case that we need to do that, because we know how we're serving our target households right now. And some category households in the county we're not serving very well, and some we're over-serving. That's, and the question is, maybe we're fine with the way how we're serving certain categories, or we want a little more balanced approach across the board. So, yes, that would go back to the board of directors. That wouldn't, we would point it out and bring it to the board
Okay,
and make recommendations accordingly.
Greg?
thanks.
Just on the, I'm trying to get a grip on this, so
Yeah,
bear
sure.
with me, but
Please.
from the look of it, we're quadrupling or tripling, somewhere between 2 to 4 times almost, the asset caps are going to go up that much. That's so significant. I'm wondering, are you confident that we're not going to have a deluge of new qualified applicants, given the demand, which to me seems, I just consider the demand for housing here to be infinite, honestly. I haven't found anything lower than that feels comfortable. And I'm concerned that this is kind of like opening a floodgate, and I just,
Yes, I hear you.
what can you tell me about this?
I can tell you that I'm confident that it's not going to open a floodgate. What this does is it's more fair. It's equitable across all the categories. As you can see, if we just left it to inflation, those numbers in the middle column would be substantially higher, particularly for lower category. And then we did look at this in respect to, I didn't bring it up today only because it might confuse the issue, but we did look at the last 5 years of internal data on the number of applicants we've had and how this would affect those households. So that weighed into our thinking and rationale as well for coming up with this methodology. I think it's going to allow, I wouldn't call it floodgates, but it will allow an opportunity for those households who we've excluded for no real rhyme or reason to at least compete for housing. And I think that's fair, because I think as our study showed, excluding 36% of eligible applicants who are working here in Pickens County, that's without any justification for doing so. I don't see how that's a good public policy. And I think a lot of folks who might qualify under the new asset caps will decide not to apply for whatever reason, because they may be just well situated down valley. But you'll get a handful or maybe more. I don't know I can't quantify it exactly, but I'm sure it's going to increase a little bit of demand, but I don't think it's going to be anything beyond our control and beyond what is fair. And then to your broader point, I mean, that's kind of the catch-22 of our program, if you will, from an economic standpoint. When you price cap anything, and it's an economic law, right? When you look at supply and demand, you price cap anything, you artificially increase demand, and you increase, you decrease supply, and so that's just a consequent effect of the game we're playing with having deed restricted affordable housing that's price controlled.
Right.
So it's kind of what we have to live with a little bit. We have to at least go into it with our eyes wide open, that knowing that that's what we're doing in a lot of ways. We're kind of creating the animal or the demand by having the program in the first place, if that makes sense.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, I'm sure. So did that answer your question?
I think it
I'm not concerned.
reassured me to some extent.
Well, I want to. Let me be more affirmative or strong. Yeah, I'm really confident this is the right approach. This was well thought out. This took months before we even took it to the board. I mean, these recommendations did not. I mean, they took place back early last year, and we've been working on them and using our own internal data to make even a better recommendation. And then it went through 2 months of hearings before the policymakers, the board of directors, and I think this is a fair approach. I mean, to just raise them willy-nilly like we've done in the past for whatever reason, just because we think the number looks appropriate, we didn't think was right, and it didn't have a rational basis. And this has a rational basis. At least we can point to it and say, hey, there's a methodology, and it makes sense, and anybody can understand it. And it's appropriate too. I don't think it's not as high as some would have had it. And in fact, it was the consultants, our consultants, who recommended get rid of your asset caps, because most communities, mountain resort communities, don't have them. They strictly qualify on income, not on assets. So that was a consideration. And we mentioned that to the APSHA board of directors, that a lot of communities, as our consultants pointed out, don't have asset caps. Well, understandably, the board said, we want asset caps, and we don't believe this community will pass the smell test, and that's understood, and I respect that. And so, to your point, I think this is. I'm confident this is the right direction, and this is not going to create some undue burden on us or the program, but in fact will open up opportunities for households who should have otherwise qualified over the last several years and couldn't.
Well, it's good. It's reassuring to hear you say that.
Yeah.
So everyone comfortable with moving this forward?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks a
Mike.
lot.
Really
Thanks for
appreciate
your taking the time to describe this.
Welcome. Thank you for the time and opportunity.
We'll keep thinking of other things to make your life just so enjoyable.
And you can call me anytime.
We do know where to find you.
Yes. I'm happy to.
Okay, John, we're going to move on to future agendas.
Sure. A couple items that were, I believe, listed on the agenda to talk about. First, we had talked about setting up a meeting on the Carbondale to Crested Butte Trail in Carbondale. It looks like we were able to get that scheduled for October 18th from 6 to 7:30, and that will be a joint meeting with the Carbondale Council.
When is October?
October, yeah. October. We're in the
I know,
way
I'm saying, when
future
is
agenda
October?
section,
We're
but
like-
that's just a
We
follow-up from
haven't even had summer
our
yet.
last meeting. And then the other thing that's on your agenda is an item where staff probably got a little bit ahead of the board in conversation. And so we had talked about the possibility of doing a site visit to Redstone, whether a board would be interested in doing a site visit to the castle prior to those issues coming in front of the board. And then we, at the staff level, thought maybe we could have the meeting down there. We probably should have had that conversation with you guys. We haven't scheduled it, but the real question I think on the table first is, does the board want us to start working on a site visit on the Redstone Castle prior to that issue coming in front of the board so that we can work through that? That's a ways off. I think the question of us having the meeting down there, that's actually pretty logistically complicated. Unless the board had strong feelings about that, I think maybe staff would back up on that request, because we can't do any streaming or televising of our meeting down there.
Yeah, and so I talked to John about this yesterday. So the Redstone Castle has an application into staff and went to P&Z on our special events review. And so that will come before us. The caucus, Crystal Valley Caucus, met on it last month. They didn't get very far, so they're having a special meeting in June, and they'll discuss it, and they'll use that opportunity to then provide staff and us their recommendations, just like every caucus does for every land use issue. So I don't see a need to go up there to listen to that. We'll have the opportunity to have heard via written comments their recommendations. And I don't know if that tied into the idea of a tour of the Redstone Castle or not. That, for me, I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, that's just a question of whether that's something that, that would be helpful for the board in its decision making. It's something that staff typically offers up in these, types of circumstances. And it is a lot of travel and effort, and the board may have plenty of information with the input from the caucus. And the application's not that complicated per se. So for me, it's not necessary. Patty?
But I don't think it's necessary, but it doesn't mean we might not find something once it's before us, and we might have something that comes up. So I don't want to close the door. I'm just saying now I don't think we need to set it up before we've heard have had any discussion about it.
Okay. Other comments on that?
There might be a possibility to do several site visits in one trip to look at trail stuff, perhaps. I was invited to go have a tour of the Sewell Ranch there on Thompson Creek, because I hadn't been on any site visit of that when there were site visits being done. And maybe that would be a possibility, especially with Greg and me both being on, not having gone on a tour. I don't know.
I didn't see the Sewell, but I'm familiar with the property. But did Jason invite you, or is that something that's before us? Should we be careful with that?
No, I was on a site tour last year.
So it's okay if we go
Individually? Yeah, they were just talking about their
It was Connor, I can't remember his last name, works with Jason on the, I think the planning of it or something.
But I don't see need a combination. You've seen it, I've seen it. If anybody wants to go on a tour, I'm sure they can arrange it with open space. Same with the castle, so.
That's where I got my compost.
Did you ever?
I just want to make sure we probably have a plan to meet in Redstone sometime this summer, early fall. Is that just for?
Well, not necessarily, but I expect that when we get the results from our consultants' summary on the Crystal Valley Trail, we had that one meeting in Carbondale, but I suspect we would probably have another meeting. At least Open Space and Trails Board would probably have a meeting up in Redstone.
Yeah, there will be, there's going to be a pretty robust public process going through the whole, so there's going to be a number of meetings happening in that area. I think the October timeframe was chosen because by that point our studies should be converging with our public input on a preferred alignment, and that may be an appropriate time when you have those two coming together to really be on the ground, seeing what that proposed alignment might look like. And so I know it's a ways off, but we have a lot of process to work through and a lot of public input to still gather.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess I have one more. We still need to add, and we'll add the EOTC prep, which will be June 13th prior to the EOTC meeting. We would have done it sooner. However, of course, we canceled our meeting next week.
Okay, Patty?
School board meeting. What happened with that?
We have not heard back yet.
Okay, so right now we don't have anything on the 12th. Yeah. The other one is, did you ever find out the basis of the discussion with the Wildcat basalt fire?
Oh, yes. They are exploring the formation of a public safety district for fire between Basalt and Snowmass. And so
combining there too?
Well, I think that's what they're going to talk about. I think it may be a separate district as a funding mechanism for both, versus combining the two, but that's what they're going to be talking
Okay,
about.
so it's something in that,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to know, since George won't be at that meeting, I'd like to have some idea, but
Yeah.
you and I can talk about
Yeah.
what's going on. Okay. Thanks, George.
Okay, did you have your hand up, Steve? Or anybody else have anything?
This EOTC prep is on the 13th, and that during our work session?
Yeah, it's not showing up your future agendas, but we will get EOTC prep on the 13th.
Great.
Anything else for future agendas? Okay, we're a little ahead of ourselves, but I see that John Penny's here, so we could push those guys up
Yeah, it's good.
if they're ready, and then we'll take our break afterwards.
Good with me?
Afternoon.
So we're going to have an airport update.
Airport update. But what would an airport update be without
An
PowerPoint?
airport,
Without knowing who's providing the update.
Yeah, got to introduce yourself too, John.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and I'm John Kinney, the airport director here with Pitkin County. So we have a update for you, just a few things happening at the airport.
I know I saw an FAA truck coming up, government plates pulling in. Looked like he was picking up equipment out there.
Yeah, they have a fair amount of work going on at the approach end of the
Yeah, he
runway.
had a trailer and he was pulling in. I followed him up Valley going, I
Yeah,
don't know.
they're replacing all the wiring associated with the Miles rail. And if you mumble that, you're pronouncing it correctly. So it's the medium approach landing intensity lights. So it's those strobes that come in. They were having some unpredictability with them over the last few years. You probably saw a couple articles on that. System's just old, so they moved it up by about 10 months to do the repair and get it a little bit more predictable. We probably had a half dozen or so flights this season
I think I got
canceled.
stuck
So
twice 'cause of that.
Patty was on 2 of those. So.
You're not changing the trajectory at all, right?
We're not changing the trajectory or alignment. All the light fixtures stay in place. It's just really the wiring and the hardware components. So really two categories for it to talk to you before the county commissioners today. Really focused on the procurement and the request for proposal process, the ones that are in play on the streets right now, and then the ones that will be coming up for in 2018, which will be very, very robust. So from terms of the in-play ones, we have 5, as you can see there at the top portion, from the restaurant, including retail, new parking vendor, new cleaning services, as well as checked baggage. And then the future one, I'll also briefly share with you the 5 that are going to be pending for us in 2018, from a variety of on-call services to, if you decide to proceed after the environmental assessment, then items 4 and 5 would kick in for program management services as well as a terminal design team. So that's what we'll talk about here. Before I get started, I was a little remiss. I'd like to introduce 2 staff people who are back behind us here. Sandra Story, who's right here, who's our administrative assistant. And then we also have Jennifer Mitchley, who's in the leases and procurement and finance and budgeting efforts. So they do a great job for us. And
Welcome.
we were able to recruit Jennifer out of California, and Sandra's been a local here for 20 years, so rather new to the valley. In terms of the first item under the ones that are in play, new restaurant operator. The vendor has accepted the staff award letter, which is obviously not the binding component. That comes to you folks, but it's later in the process. They then have 10 days to accept that staff award. They have, so that contract is now being finalized through the legal attorney's office. And the next step is that that'll be coming back to you folks in the following schedule. So for a work study session, a first reading, a second reading, and then your final decision. So that'll be taking place middle of June, first time you'll see it, and then conclude mid-July. The second one that's also in play right now is the retail operation, so it's really a mirror image. The vendors also accepted the staff award letter. They had the 10 days, responded back, yes, they'd love to participate in the opportunity. So the contract's being finalized in legal, and then it's a mirror image in terms of the schedule coming before the Board of County Commissioners.
So, John, does that mean that they don't actually start providing those services until mid-July?
Correct. So they will start, they have about a 2-week window of improvements they need to do. So really it'll be August 1st, and they'll be ready and open for business.
Same with the restaurant?
Same with the restaurant.
So what do we, that's the entire summer without a restaurant on site, or what are we doing?
Oh, great question, George. No, we actually have a bridge in place right now. So we have an operator out of the Airport Business Center who has come over and is operating temporarily for us to provide breakfasts as well as lunch, drinks and sodas. The only thing that is missing from the services that you normally would see at the airport is we don't have a bar open at this time.
So it's a BYOB?
It could be BYOB.
I can get through TSA with it.
Less than 3 ounces.
Lots of little shots.
Less than 3.
Don't give anybody any ideas.
Okay, well, it's good to know we'll have services there.
Yes,
That
we
was
do.
a concern.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our third item here out of the 5 is the new parking operator. So the staff award letter has been issued, but is still pending acceptance, so we're still within that 10-day period of time with the vendor. We did have a robust, we had 5 national parking firms bid on it, so it was a great response, great competition. So the negotiations are still continuing, and it's going to be also a mirror image on the Board of County Commissioners schedule coming back to you folks as it is for the retail and restaurant. It will be for the parking as well. The other item is, 4th item out of 5 is the new cleaning services operator. So we have a staff award pending on that in terms of their acceptance. The negotiations are still continuing. And again, it'll be a mirror image for you associated with the cleaning services. So we'll give you much more details in regards to that one coming up. And the final item in terms of the procurements that are in play, this is phase 2 of a 2-phase project. And this is the airlines check bags, and then the ability for TSA to process those. If you recall at one time when before the board gave us the support and money, thank you again, we were up to a little over 400 bags a week that were missing their flights because they just could not be processed quick enough through the TSA's very, very limited facilities. So a third CTX screen behind the scenes baggage machine has been put in place. We have put in new conveyor systems immediately behind the United Airlines ticket counter. They're ergonomically much better because one of the issues was worker comps and injuries by not only TSA but airline employees. So that has all been put in. Walls have been finished off. And now what is on the street is phase 2, which will be now the downstream, if you will, from those large CTX machines, going out to a large flat plate carousel where the tugs will all then pick up all the bags for Dallas, pick up all the bags for LA, pick up all the bags for San Francisco. So that is the phase 2. It's on the streets now until June 27th. They will then have a pre-bid conference before that deadline, walk around for any vendors who are going to be proposing on this, and then we'll be coming back to you probably sometime in the August timeframe is the guesstimate we have right now in terms of that program. Future RFPs. These are very, very substantive RFPs. The on-call engineering services has reached its maturity date. It's usually for a 5-year period. That will be coming up, as well as the on-call planning and environmental services. That's reached its maturity date as well, same time frame. For 2018, it will expire. The on-call financial services has expired, which is okay. It's not leaving us in a lurch by any stretch. And if you proceed after the environmental assessment associated with the new terminal building and associated runway component, program management services, a project of this size is really just absolutely huge. It's monumental for this size airport. Just to take the scale ability, I realize we're not comparison to Denver, but at the same time, a project that they have going on down there, they've brought in between 150 and 200 full-time employees just to manage the project. I could see a project of this magnitude, you have 10 to 15 people coming in here on a full-time basis just working this project. This is a very large project for us, not only financially, complexity in terms of operation, keeping the airport open, but a lot of disruptions going on if it's going to be stretched out over that 6-year period of time, which we're working closely with the FAA to get it condensed so that we can have a quicker start to finish period.
So does that, are we able to tap into FAA funding for for that team?
Yeah, program management services, George, is a fundable component, not quite as robust at the 90%, but close. And the other ones, in part services in terms of planning and engineering and some financial associated with the CIP. You can also use the federal funds. But a lot of those are going to be used as airport operating funds, which they historically have. A terminal design team would also be fundable as part of those areas that are eligible for funding. We could tap into the FAA, and then the remaining will be covered by the O&M budget of the airport.
And that team would be basically on site throughout this process?
During the peak periods, yes, yeah.
I get my question then is, if you have 10 or 12 more people coming in for this duration, housing is always an issue in terms of finding housing, because I'm assuming they're going to be coming from outside the valley to find these qualified, experienced people. So,
yeah, no, we're going to have some challenges, I think, throughout the project, George. And one of the items that we're going to be bringing back to the board, we had budgeted funds for housing. We had originally intended that we would use those in the deed restricted program that we've been talking to the board about. It may be better for us to repurpose some of those funds for purchase of units for airport staff, and that really accomplishes two things, because we're going to have some affordable housing requirements that we'll need to offset, and we'd like to get ahead of that, as well as providing some of the capacity that you're talking about as we ramp up and try and accomplish this project.
all right, thanks.
But more to come on that for
Yeah.
you guys. Yeah.
Okay.
Quick question, just wondering on your, at one point you thought the restaurant and retail could be the same group, but I assume it's not at this point for your proposals for your contractors for restaurant and
Is
retail.
it the same group?
Not the same people?
Actually, it's one vendor.
It's one vendor doing both?
Correct.
Got it.
Any other questions for John? No. Good, thanks.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, folks.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for coming.
Nice meeting you.
Welcome.
Welcome. So let's see, we could do open discussion. Have you sort of alerted Down Valley to get on the bus and get up here?
Yeah, that's Danette has already made it. The only I had Lindsay Utter coming in from Open Space and Trails, but I think she couldn't make it till 3 o'clock, and we were going to talk a little bit about the
That's fine.
Prince Creek Trail process, since that's getting the papers, and you guys are probably seeing some.
All right, so as long as people are moving in, we're not that far ahead, so we'll do open discussion, then we'll take a break and come back a little
And
early.
all I had for open discussion was Lindsay, so.
Oh, okay. All right, well, Steve and I went to the Climate Community Summit on Friday, and it was really well done, well organized. There were some great speakers. Bill Ritter was there for the Center for New Energy Economy. Brad Udall was there for the Center for Science and Technology Policy Research.
This was the mayor's event?
This was the mayor's event, so it was very well attended. We had elected officials from around the state. We had participants from Salt Lake City and Park City came in. So it was really well run, well organized, great information. And as part of that day, there was an ask from all the elected officials to sign on as to the Compact of Colorado Communities, it's called. And so the commitment was to sign on to it and then to bring it back to our respective boards for discussion. So I committed to sign on and bring it back to the board, just to let you know what it is and what that may entail. The Compact of Colorado Communities, the idea is to provide yet another organization, which is perhaps a challenge, but one that is focusing on local implementation and local actions. So unlike the organization that we currently join, are part of CC4CA, which is really more of a policy advocacy organization, this network would deal more as a network to look at opportunities to share information, to attract funding, to be able to get online trainings for staff in terms of being able to address budgetary concerns. And so there's not a lot of details yet, but that's sort of the intent, is to see if there's opportunity for communities to join together to address their needs, as well as a broader concern on the state, how we would implement climate action initiatives to address climate change. You want to add anything onto that, Steve?
Yeah, to address the issue of why another organization? Why can't CC4CA satisfy the needs of it? And I've noticed at CC4CA meetings that oftentimes the city of Fort Collins they'll abstain on deciding on a legislative issue because their staff doesn't have the authority to. They have to go back to the city council and do a whole presentation on something, and in terms of legislation, there's not enough time to do that. So they just abstain because maybe they don't know whether action on a certain piece of legislation that aligns necessarily with who Fort Collins is. But Fort Collins is one of the foremost municipalities in the state who are doing a climate action plan. They've been active for quite a few years and have really made a lot of headway. So something like this, Mayor Scadron's new Colorado Compact organization would fit with where Fort Collins is right now in terms of being able to collaborate with other counties and municipalities on what they're doing on, in their entities for, forwarding climate action. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, like how much they would want different groups to contribute to belonging to this. It might be a sliding scale that people could contribute what they feel like they're able to. But one thing that part of the commitment is that if we decided to join this, we would be promising staff time to do the training. Like they'd want us, 5 people from the staff that they wanted.
That was an idea, right?
And that's an idea that, possible way to go forward. Who would go through actually a training session, which I don't know where that would be.
What kind of training is that? I mean, has that been formulated?
Well, some ideas. There's an organization called, what's that organization called, Steve? It's
there's somebody out there.
ACCO. I forget what that stands for. There is a national organization, Action Climate Change organization, that provides online free training. And the idea is that, for example, when you're looking at projects that are dealing with county infrastructure, that you have someone from the finance department that can understand what that would mean in terms of budgetary issues, and how that directly ties into a climate action plan. So there's a lot of course, as always, devil's in the details. I think there's a lot more information that we would need in terms of do we have the resources that we could allocate, and if so, how many, and what would be the contribution. So it's a very preliminary discussion to start with, and again, we can say, well, we're interested, and we just need to continue to stay engaged and find out more information. And here are some of our concerns. Here are our limited resources. We've got staff going in many different directions right now. But
Agreed.
just thinking, you mentioned redundancy with CC4CA, or is there any other redundancy issues we might want to look at going forward with other groups? Is this the most efficient way to do this? And I support doing it. Just be nice to know.
We don't want to spread so thin we don't get anything done.
We should refer to our Department of Redundancy Department.
Don't be redundant.
Yeah, and it really isn't, it is covering new territory that CC4CA is not covering. Because CC4CA is working on legislative changes and PUC issues and national legislative issues. And the emphasis in this new organization is on local action, doing things in their municipalities and the counties that are, have an effect on climate change.
Well, I want to congratulate the organizers for doing it and for you guys for going to it. I think it was important and glad you were there.
So I'm sensing there's an interest for us to stay engaged and just continue to learn more about the organization and the structure before we make any firm commitments.
Yep.
And George, are they going to be using you and Steve as a primary contact right now as they develop this, or should we be reaching out to Ashley? Or
You could check with Ashley and see what the format is in
Okay.
terms of future information.
Check with Cindy too, because Cindy was there.
Yeah, but it's the city's driving. I would start with
Okay.
Ashley. That's a good idea. So that I fulfilled my commitment.
You're done for the day?
Done for the day.
And then Lindsay did get here a little earlier if you want to wrap up the open discussion items.
Yeah, come on up, Linz.
So while Lindsay's coming up, we just wanted to take an opportunity because there's been some increased, I think, email traffic and attention on the Prince Creek Trail planning process that we're going through. And so really, we just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of the process and kind of timelines of that planning process right now. And Lindsay is our expert. I'll turn it over to her.
So I'm Lindsay Eder. I'm the Planning and Outreach Manager for Open Space and Trails. One thing I want to point out before I start is that everything I'm going to talk about today is always on our projects website for Open Space and Trails. So the outreach schedule, as well as the comments we've received so far and maps, things like that, can be found at pitkinostprojects.com. So we kicked off the planning for the Prince Creek Trail and parking area a couple weeks ago. We had our main open house last week in Carbondale. We had about 60 people attend, which was
60 people?
60, yeah. It was very well attended, which we're always very excited about because you just get really good feedback, obviously, with more people there. So public comment is still open. It closes tomorrow. So you can still go on the website and provide public comment, which we are still getting. And then we will draft a plan, which goes to our board on June 6th, which is a Tuesday. Just to note that that's not our normal Thursday meeting date. It's a Tuesday, with the goal of releasing the draft plan for public comment for most of June. We will most likely have another open house, although we're discussing whether we would do a site visit instead with the public. We'll update that online when we dial it in a little bit further. And then the goal is to get a final plan adopted in July so we can start some volunteer work later this summer and fall. The plan itself, our management plans are always, they're the programming of what we do. So it's not going to have on the ground the dotted line of the trail, but it will set the parameters of how we want the trail to be. And same thing with the parking. There will more than likely end up being some options for parking that will need to be worked through a little bit further in the future. We've been working really closely with the BLM. So they're currently working on their EA to incorporate what they received in the land exchange. So we've been trying to coordinate our efforts and try to, make sure that we're all working together, as well as with Public Works, because a lot of this is obviously going to be in the right-of-way or crossing the right-of-way. And so working with Public Works on how we would phase implementation. Right now we're just still gathering public feedback before the draft plan.
Right.
Any questions? Steve?
I don't see a BOCC review on here. Is it going to be a joint meeting with, are we going to be with the OST board on July 18th?
No, excuse me, no, it's just to, I mean, it may be the joint meeting date, but it was supposed to be just to our board in that meeting.
And is this management plan something that we get the final approval here? Or is it the OST board that gets the final approval?
So the way that we've been working recently is that the OST board has the final approval. But on bigger projects, big projects, we have both boards. So I mean, it's something I guess that's up for discussion, but on this one, we proposed it just to our board.
Whenever there's any financial implications, it has to come before the BOCC. The OST board is just they create policies, but it needs to be approved by the BOCC.
If there's additional appropriations, that is the case, George. There's some discretion when the board has made an appropriation for total project in terms of implementation. And so you're correct. If the scope were to change and additional appropriations would be needed, we'd have to come back for a budget supplemental.
Yes.
And then, Lindsay, it looks like that because ideally the final plan adoption would be July 18th. So that probably means that, are you anticipating then that you would start to see some work done on whatever parking plan comes to fruition on that?
I would anticipate the parking taking longer to figure out because of working it out with the safety concerns with the road as well as potential options. So I would foresee the parking taking longer than potentially starting some of the trail.
So probably not this summer season?
Not,
I mean, as we know, that's one of the major concerns up there
Yes.
because cars parking on Prince Creek Road, safety hazards, concerns for the neighborhoods and things like that. So there's no way we could try to help address that situation this summer?
So we have taken some actions through our road and bridge shop. We have posted some no parking signs in areas where the turning radiuses were difficult for large vehicles, whether it be emergency response vehicles or large vehicles that may be going in and out, particularly of the Prince Creek subdivision. And so we've notified the Sheriff's Department of that new posting. In terms of the development of the infrastructure relative to the Prince Creek planning, there probably isn't a good way to accelerate that because of our commitment to developing the management plans and such with a robust public process, and then making the final implementation decisions based on that. But we have tried to, in the interim, provide a little bit of relief, George, on the real pinch points on those roads. That said, you'll probably still be getting calls from folks who are concerned, but any other acceleration beyond that is really about developing infrastructure that we're talking about in this public process right now.
All right, great. So the old saying, you got to go slow to go fast, right?
Right.
Anything else?
Just had a question for whoever wants to answer regarding process. So if I get a call from someone, as I have, regarding parking or access on Prince Creek and Handy, that was the choke point that came up for me. I'm not going to see this open, so I refer them to open space, and the open space board handles it or not, but it doesn't come back. When does it come back as part of the feedback to us? Because I'm still getting the calls, but I'm not sure if I'm part of this process.
Yeah, so the management plans, right now, the board is passed bylaws, and it's before you're on the board, Greg, so you weren't part of that conversation, that the management plans are actually approved by the Open Space and Trails Board, and I believe this one would fall into that same category, and then move on for implementation. Now, That's the policy position. As a practice, we bring all of those management plans back for not necessarily approval, but presentation. And obviously, if there's something where there's a real area of conflict, that's an opportunity to open that conversation. And so sometime after July 18th, when we anticipate the Open Space and Trails Board will have adopted this plan, we'll be bringing that back, staff will be bringing that back to present to this board so that you know what is being passed and implemented. And generally, there's been enough back and forth or enough understanding of at least the project goals at that point that there shouldn't be any surprises. But at some point after July 18th. Now, at some point in the future, if the board decides to change those bylaws, it's really a board-approved policy that delegates that authority to the Open Space and Trails Board. That's something this board can revisit, but right now the policy is the Open Space and Trails Board adopts those.
So, John, just in terms of Greg's question, would it make sense when the draft plan, after the draft plan's been presented to Open Space and Trails Board, to have Lindsay come in and just present that to us as well?
I mean, we can do that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Before it's formally adopted?
Yes.
And typically we do that. I'm trying to remember, I believe we will have a joint meeting between the draft plan and the final adoption of the plan, and typically we'll give an update then.
That would be the agenda item. All right, great.
And I would encourage the people that want to provide comments, they can provide comments right now on everything. So.
Great.
All right, great. Thanks, Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right, why don't we take a break, 15-minute break. We're back here like at 3:05.
Perfect. I'm dealing with this stupid discovery benefits people again. there, my mom. Is it your birthday? Well, happy birthday.
I kept you at full blast, though. I'm just saying.
But he took out 2 feet. At least you should have told me. They didn't even consider my 800 and something like that on my. Yeah, it was weird.
All right, we're going to get a department updates on from HR, Risk, Business Information, and Technology Services. A lot.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Rich Engelhardt, COO. And we have the pleasure of bringing HR and BITS to the table today. Last time we were in front of you and talking about internal services and the different sections that we manage. We had the finance department here along with the treasurer. We had Connie and budget, and Jody had presented to you a little earlier with facilities. And so the last 2 remaining departments that are part of our team is our human resources and risk management. And that's headed by Danette, and she has brought a number of her staff here along with BITS. And again, just a refresher to talk a little bit about where we start. We had our retreat this past February, and again, we build our goals and our big rocks, sand and water, so to speak, around what you all envision for the community and what you hear and have set in place as far as your strategic plan goes. So we have built all of our certainly our goals around those, and so I think you'll get a sense today from the HR perspective. And you know, I really do need to compliment both these next 2 divisions. It's been a busy year, and on top of not only just the day-to-day that comes through the doors, they have been dealing with the class and comp and the pay for performance, and those are 2 major undertakings that usually do not at the same time. And so they handled it well. They rallied and really got us through that situation, or that those 2 components of offering our employees those opportunities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danette, and Danette can certainly introduce her staff, and she'll walk you through the presentation here.
Thank you, Rich. All right, as Rich said, I'm Danette Logan. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Risk Management with Pitkin County. I've been with Pitkin County for almost 6 years now. I have a staff of 5 employees who specialize in the various subdisciplines of human resource and risk management. 3 of those employees are with me today. I'm going to focus on them in just a little bit. They are our most recent additions to the human resources team. Absent today, but nonetheless here in spirit, is Mary Kate Valentine, who focuses on compensation and benefits administration. Jimena Hoslander, who is our safety and risk management specialist. And as I mentioned, the other 3 are new, and I'm just going to take a little bit of time to talk about them just a bit. I just want to introduce you to another concept of the human resource management team. All right. We consider ourselves a team of professionals. We're very committed to advancing the county's mission to provide valued and high-quality services that support the health, safety, and well-being of the people and the natural environment. We consider valued and high-quality services a very impressive tag. Therefore, we want our decisions and our actions to give that rich meaning. For human resources and risk management, this means developing and delivering programs, policies, and plans that add value and unleash the possibilities of our people. That's my biggest commitment, and the team's biggest commitment is the spirit of our people. We know and believe that excellence in human resource management practices clears the way for our people to focus on their purpose, which is the services that we provide as a county to our citizens. All right, I'm going to jump into recent accomplishments. These accomplishments occurred over the calendar year 2016 into early 2017. I'm then going to spend some time going over with you our 2017 goals and objectives that we'll be working on for the remainder of the year. As I mentioned, I've got 3 of my newest employees with me today. This is an accomplishment. So 3 new employees in 1 year. We're very excited about that. In January of 2016, we celebrated the addition of a records management and office administration technician. This was a key position to help support our Human Resource Information System, or HRIS Ascentus, project and implementation. I'd like to take just a brief opportunity to acknowledge this new team because they hit the ground running, and they were absolutely, in addition to the rest of the team, just the most important components of why we were so successful in 2016. So I'll start with Elizabeth, and within a month I sent an email to John Peacock and to Phyllis Mattice, our Assistant County Manager, and I said to them, gosh darn you guys, Elizabeth is a few times in one's career does this ever happen contributor. She rises to the occasion, anticipates needs way ahead of time, achieves results, builds very solid relationships. She identifies, consults, and advises on identified opportunities always. And then takes immediate action, which is so important. She is a true top performer. So 2 words come to mind when I think about Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you are delightfully awesome. Love having you on this team. Thank you.
And a new homeowner.
Yes. She's moving the end of this week.
Yep.
That's a good thing.
Couple days.
We also, in April of 2016, recruited a very talented talent management administrator, Melissa Knight. Melissa, if you don't mind also, I'd like to read a snippet from her performance review because, again, I believe it summarizes my thoughts and experiences of our relationship over the year 2016. Melissa, you jumped right in at the onset of your employment, and I have yet to see you simply tread water. Notable achievements include a commitment to enhancing the county's employment brand. We've had over 300 hits to our employment video, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. The development of a talent management guide, a performance improvement plan template to support our employee success, an updated seasonal on-call retention policy critical to our departments that utilize that contingent labor, and the implementation of the county's first ever employee engagement. And you just graduated from Roaring Fork Leadership recently, Friday night, right? So congratulations on that. Executive team members and county leadership are refreshed by the talent you bring to the HR team. You cleaned up some roads, built a house, led the department in my absence, attended Roaring Fork Leadership. You're selected as an AIM team member and have been approached by the Aspen Youth Young Professionals Association Board. Wow. Well, thank you for your contributions. And last but not least, our health and well-being specialist, our guru. This was a position that was introduced to Pitkin County in May of 2016. At present, this is a 2-year term limited appointment, so you'll be seeing my smiling face during our budget go around this year to secure this position full-time permanent. So welcome Joanna Ryback. Also another little snippet here. Joanna, you are simply a shining star. Since your date of hire in May, you have run a mighty kick, and I don't think I can say that next word, but you'll get my point. Goals and objectives marathon, quite fitting for a workplace wellness guru. In your first year, I had to breathe deeply when I was writing this performance review because so much was going on, but I think it really summarizes your accomplishments in a half a year, really, right? You implemented a health coaching engagement plan in June, and you got kudos from the head of the VHA Board of Directors. Through the months of July and August, you conducted the county's second Hero Scorecard assessment, and we did very well on that. You met with 32 section leaders and department managers to get feedback on well-being and retention, successes, and challenges. I think we're only into month 1 still. Attain the qualification necessary for the HealthLink's Healthy Business Certified Partnership recognition and began preparing for the county's health fair. Let me catch my breath. In September, you continued to work diligently on VHA initiatives and a strong representative of Pitkin County for that group. You sourced and began implementing My Health Break online wellness portal. In October, you launched and then held information sessions introducing our employees to My Health Break, created the Employee Health and Wellbeing Advisory Team, and closed the month with a fine health fair. November and December, you never slowed your pace. You ensured Pitkin County's health and well-being program initiatives are in full compliance with EEOC notice requirements, very important. You completely engaged the Employee Health and Wellbeing Advisory Committee and lent your expertise in the county's first ever employee engagement survey. Intermingled with all of this, not only did you look at furniture and partitions for our new building as part of the visioning team, but you, along with Melissa, built a house and cleaned up some of our roadways.
Cheapers.
Whew. So thank you all. Thank you for the contributions that you've made to Pitkin County.
Well, thank you. Congratulations, and thank you for sharing the performance review with us. I think that's a first.
And they're happy that she brought the right side of that performance review. They do a great job. Yeah. They do a great job for us.
All right, moving on to other recent accomplishments in 2016, 2017, in partnership with public sector personnel consultants. I'm on the wrong slide, sorry about that. We implemented a simplified, streamlined, and sustainable job classification and compensation approach. Folks, this was a year-long project, and it involved many hours of staff, employee, and manager work. We kicked off this project by having all of our employees fill out a position analysis questionnaire so we could hit the ground running right out of the gate. From there, public sector personnel consultants, along with Pitkin County management, identified the 21 market comparators to benchmark our positions against. Okay, and this was extremely important. We threw the net out much wider this go around, and our criteria for that selection included situated communities, high cost of living, etc., and also communities that we see that we're losing employees to and we're attempting to attract employees from. Through many meetings with our employees, we finally emerged with public sector surveying 129 of our positions, and we found over 1,160 comparable jobs in the market to ensure that we were competitive. This was a good thing. And we found that we were competitive for over 94% of our positions. All right, skipping ahead on this project, we implemented the new job classification and compensation structure in early April of this year. As a result of that implementation, 133 of our employees realized a salary increase. The cost of the general fund was around $330,000, and the cost to all Pitkin County funds around $485,000. And we came in under budget. Okay. Thus far, I would have to say we're in a stabilization period, in my opinion, right now as it relates to the rollout of this new class and comp program. But what we're hearing is that employees are engaged in the process. They understand how their positions were marketed against our external market, how they were placed in their particular pay grade range, including the position of their placement. So going really well. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. The second thing we did is, as part of our benefits plan initiative in 2016, is that we implemented an employer-paid accident and critical illness plans to our benefit options in 2017. So these are two plans that employees who work 20 or more hours per week can participate in voluntarily. The accident insurance pays a lump sum cash benefit to our employees who are in a eligible type of accident or sustain an injury as a result of that accident. And another income replacement benefit that we looked at is the critical illness program, which will provide to our employees a cash benefit when an insured person is diagnosed with a covered critical illness. In addition to these two components of our benefit plan, we also continued our journey to migrate our employees from our open access plan to our consumer-driven health plan, still keeping a pulse on what's going on in the ACA environment. And I'm pleased to state that we had a 20% migration overall migration total, and we arrived at 25%, so it's working. The political environment around ACA right now is a little uncertain, but we're going to stay the course. We're going to look at options in 2017 for 18 plan changes that might continue that migration. All right, as Rich mentioned, through all this, we also introduced the implementation of a new performance management process and pay for performance framework. 2016 was our pilot year. During that year, we transitioned from a mid-year budget cycle to a calendar year budget cycle, and so we had to do some creative things with our compensation adjustments through this pilot. But nonetheless, the county introduced several new components to the performance management framework. The county, along with employee feedback groups, identified key competencies, both organizational and job-related, that our employees will be rated against that help support elevated performance to our citizens and our internal departments. We also introduced for the first time SMART goals, okay? And employees were provided with over 300 hours of SMART goal training so they understood the concept of establishing goals. Our next plan is to actually introduce to the organization cascading goals all the way down from the Board of County Commissioners to the county manager, floating down and cascading down through Rich and Phyllis to our employee base, those key goals that the county wants to embrace as a whole. So we think that this went really, really well. Why do we think that? Our employees told us it did. There are still some areas of uncertainty after we engaged in an employee survey. Some of these uncertainties showed up in our employee engagement survey, and I'll talk about those in a little bit, and what we're going to do as we continue this pilot program in 2017. I mentioned earlier that we completed an employee engagement survey. Our plan is to conduct this survey every 2 years. So this was our baseline survey. We did engage Mountain States Employers Council to help us with that survey. They are an anonymous organization, so there's no concern about confidentiality. We are also able to compare our results of the survey to 250 other participating organizations, compare our norms to theirs. Okay. We are excited that 198 of 262 possible participants completed the survey, 76% participation rate. Boy, say that fast 3 times. So that was a success. That's not the norm. A much lower participation rate is normal for organizations our size. Focusing on just the very positive and then dropping down to the not so positive, I don't like the word negative, responses from our employees. These are opportunities for development. Ratings of 3.75 and above fell under the dimension of benefits, supervision, training and development, outcomes, satisfaction, and work-life balance. So it's not that we don't need to pay attention to those things moving forward, but it's good to know that our employees are feeling very strong about these particular components of their employment. Opportunities for improvement based on our employee feedback includes chances for advancement, which we'll be looking at not only through our new job class program, but through succession planning. Poor performance is addressed in a timely manner, and then communication. So one of the things that our new AIM team is going to be focusing on in 2017 are the feedback as it relates to communication and the other 3 priorities that rose to the top. So that team right now is coordinating. Melissa, I don't know, we're where we're at exactly with the employee engagement survey, but we're working on communication with Pat Bingham, and then we're working on our performance management process, et cetera. So they have a significant involvement in kind of setting the course straight as it relates to that feedback. How am I doing on time, guys?
We'll get through the video here.
Okay.
I want to see the video. I'm
Sorry.
like, wait for it.
All right. We also deployed new approaches to talent management. And what I'd like to do right now is share with you a video that is part of our branding of the organization.
See if it works, right?
The nice thing about today is that we do have BITS people. We have Elizabeth in the stands. We've got some serious support. So.
Does living in a beautiful place in the middle of the Rocky Mountains sound appealing? Does working for an employer that serves our citizens sound enticing? Have you ever thought about working for Picton County? Well, now's your chance. Picton County is located in the heart of the White River National Forest, surrounded by...
Beautiful.
Did not do it?
Okay, well, clearly the county manager should not.
We enjoy skiing, biking, rafting, fly fishing, arts and culture, music, and world-class culinary. Our employees tell us they love the lifestyle.
I like working for Picton County because it provides me a lifestyle in which I can do many outdoor activities. Last weekend I floated the river on Sunday, rode my dirt bike on Monday, and went for a nice long mountain bike ride on Tuesday.
The county's purpose is to enhance the quality of life for everyone who lives, works, and visits here, while conserving the natural environment as a basis for our community's success. When you work for Picton County, you could be part of that greater purpose.
The best thing about working for Picton County is that I get to utilize my degree in urban and regional planning and my experience to work in a department, community development, to help and build this community and watch it develop in a meaningful and rich way. And we are so lucky to work in a department that gets to be part of this community.
We have a dynamic team of roughly 250 employees spread across 32 departments, ranging from the airport to the sheriff's office to open space and trails and emergency management.
I enjoy my job at Picton County because it's fast-paced, it's challenging. I get to work with a vast array of people throughout the entire valley working on emergency preparedness, making us a more disaster-resilient community, which to me is a meaningful job.
The county offers a wide range of health and well-being benefits to keep our employees and their families healthy and happy. Their jobs offer challenge and purpose, and the benefits to give them peace of mind.
One of the benefits that I really enjoy the most is the health benefits that the county provides. It really allows me to make sure that I'm not only taking care of myself, but I can take care of my family. They really hold our health as #1 priority because they know in order to keep us working and serving the community, we need to remain healthy so we can continue to serve.
If you want to be a part of supporting something great in a beautiful place that offers flexibility, ample time to recharge, competitive pay, holistic health benefits, complimentary bus passes, well-being, and professional opportunities, check out our open positions and apply online.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, you can find this video on our employment website.
So how new is this?
We implemented this, Elizabeth or Melissa, we're on board 3 months? About 3 months? Yeah, so mid last year.
And have you been tracking the success on it in terms of?
As of today, we're at 330 views.
One thing I had noticed, I had sent out an email, and Melissa had emailed back, and in the bottom, how you can put Picton County where you're from. Well, this was tagged into that. So anybody that receives an email now from Melissa, our talent recruiter, you can click on that, and it pops up. So it excellent way of getting the word out about Picton County and what it means to work for this organization.
So, but Danette, you said you had to date about 330 viewers. How many applications have actually come in from that?
Oh my gosh. For the year? Yeah.
I want to say it was about 1,400.
2016?
1,400
Applicants apply for positions.
off of this?
Well, this part of it, this is
That's part of it. That's, I was just, yeah.
A lot of it's us just watching it
Right.
to see if we're in it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Good
thank
job.
you. Very quickly, another approach to talent acquisition that we recently engaged in is with a partnership with Glassdoor. You may be familiar with this website. It is an area where our employees can go in and give feedback about their employment experience with the county. Likewise, if an applicant is interested to find out what type of benefits the county offers, what our employees are saying about their employment experience, they can go to Glassdoor and provide feedback. This is a very common thing in today's social media environment, so we're monitoring that.
Are there positives and negatives posted on that?
There can be.
That's
There
an
can be.
honest and open way to, that's why it's a
Exactly.
glass door.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks, Patty. All right, I'm going to whip through the rest of these guys because I'm told I'm taking way too much time and having way too much fun up here. I mentioned also an accomplishment about the health and well-being of the county employee community, that we introduced a phased approach to strategic and comprehensive health and well-being approaches. And most of those I covered with you when I read Joanna's snippet from her performance review. We were also a key participant on the Human Services and Public Health Building Security Project, and organized and delivered emergency response training. Jimena Hoslander was gearing that project up. And finally, we executed an electronic records management initiative. This is important to us because we're the first department, believe it or not, HR, with all the personnel files and everything, that went virtually paperless in 2016. So we're now looking at a technology that supports our electronic files, okay, moving forward. So that was a good thing to do. All right, very quickly, we're going to be just as busy in 2017. We're going to continue on our classification and compensation journey, really by simply creating a guideline and practice manual to ensure consistency in our processes and to ensure that our employees understand placement and pay grade ranges, et cetera. So that'll be published in the next month. We're partnering with our Valley Health Alliance organizations, the City of Aspen and Aspen Valley Hospital, in a joint venture around three or four benefit options. One is we're going to look at our stop-loss opportunity with purchasing power, pharmacy benefits management, again, contract and purchasing power, a center of excellence, and also the need to address mental health services. I've got a bunch of notes behind this, guys, but I'm just going to speed it up. If you have any questions, just let me know. I mentioned earlier that a key objective of this year is PTO exploration and opportunity. So this is something that the AIM team has been charged with. The county is evaluating this policy because it's considered both a liability to the county and it's also considered punitive to our new employees when they go into arrears with their annual leave or sick leave balances when they first join us and there's a holiday that may be approaching. Our employees go into arrears. At present, this project has been presented to the AIM team for assessment and evaluation. They've been given 3 options to consider and come back to the executive team with a recommendation. We're also working on the home ownership shared equity program. The Board of County Commissioners prioritized workforce housing as a strategic plan initiative in 2016. So, Rich, I believe you're actually heading up this project. HR is just supporting initiatives. I mentioned earlier succession plan and that opportunity. You know, given the county's aging workforce, we predict that leadership vacancies in the next 5 to 7 years will be significant. So we need to plan accordingly. At present, 27% of the county's workforce is between the ages of 50 and 59, and 18% of the county's workforce is over the age of 60. So succession planning is a systematic approach that will ensure leadership continuity by recruiting and or encouraging individual employee growth through this plan and development into anticipated vacancies. Oops. All right. Employee and employee on and offboarding expansion. So Melissa is heading up this project to ensure that our employees have a great employment experience right outside the gate when they come to new hire orientation. So we've created, I think it's a 4-part new hire orientation program. We'll now have an all-day event on the first day of employment. John Peacock's going to get involved in, what do you call it, County Management 101, something like that. There's some paper in there somewhere. Public sector, okay. Public sector.
Sure.
And also the offboarding process. It's very important for us to gather and garner information when employees leave this organization as to the reason why they're leaving, so we can intervene appropriately if necessary. Implementing an organization-wide training and development strategy and an employee health and well-being strategy implementation in 2017, along with a more robust workers' compensation, property casualty liability, incident and accident reporting process. This is key. We really, this is really the tool, but the purpose of this is to be able to conduct a very robust root cause analysis into accidents, and then as a result of root cause analysis or accident investigation, implement the appropriate corrective actions to ensure that this doesn't happen again, either for the safety of our employees or the safety of our citizens. Whew. We're also going to look at conducting a request for a proposal for a new third-party administrator governing our workers' compensation claims management. And finally, in NADOC's pilot department, we're working closely with BITS on this for document management. This is the technology that I mentioned earlier. Any questions?
Steve, what do you do in your spare time?
Are you building a house?
Yeah. Joanna teaches me to breathe well, center myself along with the rest of the team. Yeah. Thank you.
So with that, we'll bring up John Lloyd, who oversees the IT side. But as you can see, human resources really is human resources. I mean, they're passionate about what they do. So I thank Danette for all your efforts and how you do things. Now, you'll hear from John. He's a man of little words because he communicates through electronics. So I'm sure we'll get through his part here just pretty quickly for you. So.
John, this is paper.
Good afternoon, everyone. John Lloyd, Chief Technology Officer. Paper, yes. Well, it's something we all have to bear with for a while, but not in perpetuity. I'll just start off with BITS. Who are we? What are we all about? We have an organizational mission to support our customers so they can support, in turn, their customers. We also feel a community mission to make sure that the public can get access to public documents without any hassles. The vision of BITS is to provide secure access to that information for everyone, anytime, any location, any device. Certainly there are records that are private, but for the public records, we should not stand in the way ever. We should always step aside and let the information flow. BITS also subscribes to a code of ethics and a code of conduct. The county has its own, and we have one that sort of is a supplemental approach to ethics and conduct. And the reason why we do it separately is that the work that we do affects everybody in the organization. Typically, you think about public safety as being one of the services that we really can't afford not to be, I guess, ready to produce and support every day of the week. And our code of ethics is such that we want to be in a position so that our actions can never be challenged from an ethical, moral, or legal position. We take ethics and conduct very seriously, and we will continue to do so. BITS, in the excellence category here, we really strive for excellence at all times. We talk about BITS or excellence being an outcome. It's not something that you can just go out and buy. It's something that emerges from your culture. It's a matter of doing the right things right the first time. It's one of the typical things, at least in the IT business. If you don't have time to do something right the first time, you'll have time to do it right the second time. And we want to avoid the second time. We want to do it right the very first time. And that's the key thing about us really striving for excellence. The big rocks that BITS is facing in 2017, The financial systems replacement, the ERP, is going to be big, 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 and bigger. It's going to be expensive and more expensive and more expensive, and it is absolutely necessary. And I'm really glad that finance is running it, not me. Now, we are doing also, we're in the tail end of the electronic signatures project in terms of just being a normal, ordinary activity that we support through the help desk and through personal meetings and such. So electronic signatures already is saving people lots of time, lots of effort. Another big factor coming up, another project coming up is the two-factor authentication. This means that you can no longer sign in to the network with one password. You have to sign in with the password and a token off your telephone, or a special token you're given if you don't have a county phone. Security is such that you've all read about it in the mail recently, cryptoware. Local governments have been attacked, and they've had to spend some tens of thousands of dollars to get their data back. It's unlikely to happen with us. We have a very good vendor in Pro Velocity, but it still could happen. So two-factor authentication makes your access to the network and your Gmail not twice as effective, but probably 100 times as effective. We're also working this year, another big rock is helping community development with their permitting system project. We're now in the final stages of the requirements definition, which is the key thing in doing these kinds of projects. You have to know what you have to get done and what your customer needs before you start. If you start without knowing your complete requirements, you'll get into an endless cycle. So through our business process case, we make sure that we have the requirements well defined and amenable to solutions via automation. Recent accomplishments, I guess we didn't do anything.
There you go.
Well,
Oh, no, they didn't show up on there, did it?
It came out, that did disappear at one point in time. And we had a few items up there, which you can imagine as we go, but I'll track those down and get them back to you. This is.
Do you want to use mine?
They may be on yours. Whenever we had submitted it, they were there. It just didn't show up on the slide, so. Here you go. Sure, thank you.
See, you got to have that two-signature check-in thing.
Pay to get that data back.
Yeah, you have to pay to get that data.
Yeah, I could have held it ransom.
We're gonna
This
take
is a
that
nice
out.
little thing here.
It is.
Some representative tasks that we took care of last year and part of this year. We completed the elections address audit, which is necessary to make sure that people get the right ballots. We helped with the configuration of open enrollment for the benefits program in late last year. We assisted the county clerk with their shift from their old records product to the new county fusion product. And we supported open space and trails and the clerk and recorder digitizing and managing images of permanent and historic records. We have a ComDiv went live with a paperless permitting system on January 1st of this year. I'm going to have to get this one. It doesn't want to move.
How do you roll that up?
Just scroll up one finger.
There it is.
It was stuck with the window open. Now also we rebuilt and reinstalled the Osprey camera.
Which is very cool.
Yeah.
It's getting more hits than our regular web pages get. In second quarter of this year, we honed the agenda management process. You've all seen bits and pieces of it. And agenda management, I'm hoping will be that boost toward going less and less paper and more electronic. But we will support the agenda in whatever fashion you want it supported. Electronic signatures, we talked about that for a bit.
So now you're back on.
Now we go back to the 2017 tasks. Our continuous task, thank you. Our continuous task is customer service and customer support. That is a given part of what we do. These are sort of more global kinds of task issues. Reviewing the budget, looking for applications to recommend for funding. The second quarter, we start implementing project and upgrades, and we report on plans in progress on the various applications. Third quarter, we review and update the applications portfolio and ranking of business cases, and we identify changes to the applications management plan so that if the executive team or the AIM team, or in conjunction, both of them, recommend a number of projects, We go through, do an evaluation, do a cost-benefit analysis of those projects, and make recommendations in the budgeting process about which projects have the best return. Beyond that, it's up to the customer to make a case for their business applications. And also, the fourth quarter of this year, we'll start talking about fiscal year 18 objectives and plan for future information technology strategic planning issues. In terms of collaboration, one of our values, BITS, has really two cultures. There's a cognitive culture, which it talks about shared intellectual values and norms, and there's an emotional culture that talks about how these things affect people. The cornerstone of BITS culture is collaboration, not competition. We're too small to compete with each other. We have to collaborate. And in that realm, Google provides excellent collaboration tools across the organization. In terms of open communication, we believe, as I mentioned earlier, that information is to be shared, not sequestered. The right approach to sharing this information, to having open communication, is the external web presence via pitkincounty.com. There's the internal intranet via PCIN. There's Google file sharing, and there's enterprise content management. And I would point out that as much as technology changes and phrases change, enterprise content management has now been supplanted by information governance. So we are talking, or will be talking about information governance with regard to the ECMS. BITS is a learning organization. We support a positive work environment through comprehensive training, cash awards for technical certifications. When I send people off to get trained, they have to take an examination to be certified in that particular training. And if they are, depending on the particular training, they get a cash bonus. This is a beneficial tool. It makes people really want to get educated, and it makes people more productive. We can get the job done faster with better trained people. We also have flex time. We do telework. We have retreats twice a year, and we have an open door policy. Now, since we have the weekly staff meetings, we have mixed mode here. One of the things that we have done is we're doing the presentation in the PDF format, where we need to be doing the presentation here online, but we couldn't get it online. So what I've got to show you next, assuming it's being good. Is something called Who's Who. And Who's Who is an effort that we undertook to make the rest of the organization aware of who BITS was and what BITS did. It seemed to have enough promise that we took it and expanded it to internal services completely. So finance will have a Who's Who page, as will HR, as will facilities. And it's something that could easily be rolled out across the organization to everyone. Again, some reiteration of mission and vision. The staff is highlighted by me, of course.
You look so serious here, Joe.
What a nice-looking guy. You know? I always like that approach to things. And what we've done in this technology and in this approach, we talk a little bit about people's expertise and qualifications and what they are primarily responsible for within the department itself. Susan Sullivan, you all know, the Information Governance Administrator. You can see that she came from Washington, D.C. She got outside the Beltway and never went back. And Nate, you all know, of course, Customer Support Manager. He's been there for 17 years. Doesn't look like it, but he's been there a long time. And you can see the things that he does, his primary support tasks and activities. Carrie Fleischman, you probably never heard of her. She's involved in everything behind the scenes, it seems like, from human services to HR to internal services.
Nuclear? Did I see nuclear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she worked in the nuclear industry, as did Susan Sullivan. Skylar, you will have met. He's an MBA from Mississippi. He does the special reporting that for right now all of the crystal reporting product uses, which is primarily the ComDev group. But he also does Bluebeam support, and Bluebeam is a technology that allowed the Community Development Department to go paperless review on January 1st. This is Melissa Jodas, our most recent addition. She came to us from Phoenix, and she's glad to get back to the mountains. She lived here in the mountains in the 90s. Her particular responsibilities now include the two-factor authentication. She's the analyst running this, Google training, report writing, and software needs assessment. Mary Lackner, she's been here a long time, 30 years plus. She does all of the heavy-duty GIS stuff, and she's also the application development manager. Tyler Lambeth, he came across from the city when the county took over GIS, and you can see he's got a number of years of experience. And he does a lot of mapping support, and he's also now that our previous person, BPA that was trained on cartograph, Tyler has taken that over, and we're also getting some people retrained, cross-trained, so we have the product available. And then Alex Durant is the Address and GIS BPA analyst, and he's in charge of the 911 interface and the Spillman record system. And Pro Velocity, you've all met and been served by Donna, and you've probably all met and been served by Brandon. They're the people who are assigned to us full-time. We also have, Pro Velocity has a total of about 30 employees scattered across the Western Front, and these are the two of them that are assigned to us. And that's a quick overview of BITS and what we do.
Yeah, this who's who really is something that we feel is going to be, incorporated throughout the whole organization. We had a lot of departments coming to us and said, "What is the internal service department? Who are you? What do you do now?" So BITS took this on in conjunction with something I think that Danette was working on as well with her staff, and so the two are coming together, and so you'll see this used more prominently as we roll it out.
Now, can the public access that?
No, that's internal only.
Okay. Because
But at
one
some
of the
point-
frustrations I have in going to other government organizations' websites, there's no way for me to actually get a hold of that person that I'm trying to get a hold of. There's no phone number, there's sometimes no name of staff, no email, and I find it really frustrating when you're trying to just talk to one person saying Glenwood Springs City, and you can't, the city government, and you can't get to them.
You may have noticed we put email links in this document in Who's Who, but not phone numbers. So we try to gate the amount of communications people get from the outside particularly. And we prefer that people use email.
Pro
to
Velocity
your
had
point,
their phone numbers, so.
Yeah. To your point, Commissioner, is one of the things that AIM is talking about, the advisory team, is external communication as well, and this may be something that could be utilized in our web page as well in the future. So the thing I think we're most proud of is the last two people that are University of Colorado grads, and they offset all the Kansas graduates around here. So.
Well, and I noticed there's a lot of people from New
That
Mexico
in Wyoming,
that offset the
yeah.
people from Grand Junction.
Yeah. But with that, that's the last two departments we have. So, Chairman, if you have any questions, or Commissioners.
Yeah, thanks. Steve, go ahead.
John, I wanted to find out what county fusion is that the clerk and recorder's office is doing.
That is the replacement system for their old Encore recording system. So all the recorded documents now go into County Fusion. It's the same business process, just a different technology to store it and retrieve it. And County Fusion will eventually fall under the information, the information guidelines of the old ECMS project. So that's what County Fusion is. It's just a new. They went to RFP and did evaluations and selected a good product.
It's a big deal. I mean, it is really the application that is storing and used to access all of that information, that we record about properties or, other items at the clerk and recorder's office. So, just a shout out to BITS and the clerk's office. That was a big implementation that was done this year with, I think, very little drama, which is.
Yeah, Susan Sullivan spent probably 80% of 3 weeks working on that project with them to implement it, and it came off flawlessly.
Great.
What doesn't surprise me, but always continues to impress me, is the professionalism and the quality and the experience of our staff. And I would just want to thank you all, from HR, the video in terms of recruitment, the training that you're doing, providing career opportunities and the benefits to be able to maintain a workforce that this community has come to expect in terms of high quality for us to continue to provide the programs and services we do as a county. And for BITS, where we've come in the last 3-4 years is light years. We would never have been able to get to where we are, where we were in the past. So you guys have done a tremendous job with your staff, John.
Well, thank you.
So thank you all.
The other thing, George, is the patience. Everyone in the county staff has a great deal of patience dealing with the community. The community can not always be easy at all times. And I think, speaking for myself, dealing with me.
I didn't say that.
I saw you were just dying. And I appreciate that. I'm catching up slowly.
Good, well, thank you.
That's partly because we have a director of well-being and happiness.
It's awesome because I got to figure out how to.
I think, is there a minister of happiness? What kind of Bhutan or someplace, maybe the only other place that has this. This is great.
You just promoted me.
You should wear a
Succession
robe.
planning. Yes.
Wear a robe and have a hat of some sort.
But I like that. We'll write that down. Yeah.
I have to figure out how to get my Fitbit tied up to something because I've been putting in so many steps. I think I'm beating everybody these days. I've been working on
I
it.
did have a couple of questions.
All right, well, thank you all for coming up.
Well, he's got.
Greg, do you have a question?
Questions. This is regarding IT and BITS, which is fascinating stuff. You had flex time and telework in one of the categories. How do you see that expanding for use in the county? Can you imagine more people telecommuting, and
We already did.
can we use flex time to, chart and monitor it and employ it so we can get people off the highway at rush hour?
I would say absolutely yes.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
And great. Just to expand
Indulge man, a little word.
Just to expand on Jen's answer a little bit, we do have a countywide policy that does allow for telecommuting and, as appropriate, flex time. So it's not unique to BITS. BITS is, I think, been a leader in terms of employing those and figuring out how to make those work while providing customer service. It's certainly something that we're going to be looking at, maybe expanding on, particularly during, for example, the bridge closure and such. Not all positions lend themselves to if you're an equipment operator or you're on the front desk providing customer service during specific hours, those positions won't benefit as much from these types of opportunities. But it is something that actually earlier this year, about 3 months ago now, or maybe even
About
6
four,
months,
actually about
4
4
months ago, we did standardize a policy across the county, HR policy for how we'd implement telecommuting and such.
That's great.
Great. She wanted to add something, Joanna.
Can I add?
You need to get.
You have to come up to the mic.
You got a mic.
So with our health and well-being strategic plan, we not too long ago officially adopted our health and well-being goals, our pillars, our goals that we're working towards, and one of them is to increase flexible work arrangements. So, and that comes in many different forms, whether you're salaried, hourly, it doesn't look equal in all departments, but flexible work arrangements certainly create a positive, healthy work environment and truly can enhance the health and well-being of employees. And it doesn't always equate to telecommuting. For some, telecommuting may work, but there's numerous of different flexible work arrangements, besides telecommuting that have also been shown to be really productive. So it's something that I've started working on with a few departments and with the advisory team, and definitely a work in progress and won't happen overnight in some departments, but really identifying how that looks and feels like in each department so it's truly effective for all the departments.
And Greg, I just add, you see this whole portfolio of things that we're doing. So, this would go hand in hand with our kind of change in how we're trying to evaluate performance. Rather than time in a seat, how do we measure outcomes versus time in a seat and achieving the goals that the community wants. So all of these things are interrelated in changing how we both hold ourselves accountable, evaluate our performance, and provide a positive work environment for our employees.
You just teed him up to say all that.
Well, I would also suggest that the key to a good telework program is you have to step back a couple of steps and look at the business process of each operating department. You have to optimize their business process. Then you look at tools of technology to support that. Then you look at, do they have to work in the office or elsewhere? So there's a regimen of approaches and issues to consider.
This to me sounds like kind of the disruptive model. You're going and you're improving things, but it's happening at a quick enough pace that it reminded me of a conversation George and I had earlier just about the disruption. There was a story about the head of Uber today, who's a very disruptive company and a character who's, he's wanted in so many countries for violating the rules, but they've decided they're going to break the rules because they need to change things. And I'm not suggesting we do that here all the time. But what you're seeing is some amazing changes happening with technology and the way they've changed transportation, for instance, in a dramatic way. And if we could think that way a little bit, and it seems to me that you are doing that in some respects, thinking, how can we disrupt the norm for transportation in the county? I couldn't help but make the comparison. The question I had, the next question is, I noticed you're working off PDFs there, and then you had to go online, and I'm still trying to figure out how to make PDFs work well on this. We've got annotate programs and things like that. I haven't found the thing that works yet, and then I realize around the county we have maybe several different people using different types of apps to do the same thing. So I'm hoping we find a general policy on apps that everyone uses, say, to annotate a PDF and work with it. I haven't found that yet, and wanted to bring that up. And any other challenges you have toward going electronic? I know 3 of our commissioners have yet to go paperless, which is very embarrassing for George and me. So we're being patient. I don't know, where do you think that's going?
That's going to go back to the county manager.
There is a good answer.
We'll talk off.
Just in terms of finding, let's find the annotation app that we all want to use, because I just looked and there's thousands of them. Like, which one do I buy next? Then finally, I think do I have anything else here for you? IT, working remotely. Say we want to have a meeting in Redstone. We just decided it's too big a hassle because we can't go live. All of a sudden, we can't go meet in the hinterlands of the county because we don't have the ability to live stream. And hopefully with broadband coming in, that's going to change. But it would be nice to have a county meeting in Meredith for the 3 people up there who would come, or Redstone for the 60 who would come. Not have the technology being the limiting factor.
Right now, the technology is not the limiting factor per se. The limiting factor is bandwidth of the internet. Those rural communities just don't get enough. In some cases, they get no service. We have a separate broadband initiative going on at this moment, and we're in phase 3 of that part of the project.
Starting phase 3, yep.
So there's hope. It's going to be a matter of time because somebody has to pay the money to build out that middle mile and last mile. And who's going to do that?
And that'll probably happen before I get rid of my paper.
We can answer the middle mile question. We'll have that done this summer. The last mile question is going to be the challenge. And so This, just teeing me up again, thanks, Greg. This plays into the whole conversation that we've been having about modernization. And modernization is about our infrastructure, it's about our people, it's about the tools. All of this goes hand in hand. And so when we talk about modernizing the organization, it's yes and all of these things. And so we've had a really big push of different projects really over the last 4 or 5 years that have been aimed at modernizing our infrastructure, our processes and training around our people, how we're organized. And so you're touching on all the right points, and that's why all of these things have really started moving in parallel together over the past few years, and hopefully over the next 3 or 4 we'll start to be able to bring some of those pieces to conclusion, and some of them are forever. We'll be working on them, but these are all elements of modernization when we talk about modernizing the organization.
I would like to add too that BITS had an off-site retreat last week, and one of the items that came up as an action item was increased standardization, the very things you're talking about. The fewer products there are for us to support, the better we can support them. The cheaper the technology is. So standardization is a key component of growing the infrastructure.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Thank you, guys.
One last thing before we leave. As you know, on the 13th, we've got our tour coming up. I just want to remind you that be sure and wear closed-toe shoes. We can't have open-toe shoes. Possibly jeans and maybe tighter fitting clothes so you don't get snagged on anything. Yeah, John would not be allowed, but just a reminder, we do have hard hats and vests now, and so we're looking forward to taking you out. Are you okay with looking down into the hole rather than going down into the hole?
I want to be in the hole.
All right. It'd be a lot probably safer that way to start out with, and then once we get the concrete poured and everything, but you'll be able to see kind of what's happening.
If I wear my steel-toed shoes, can I get down in the hole?
What? Yeah.
I went and looked in the hole today, just over here by the jail. Cool. You can get a pretty good view.
You really can, yeah. And when we get upstairs into the building, you'll be able to look down as well through the windows. But we're getting ready to pour concrete on Friday with some of that foundation work. So it's coming along.
Now, Steve, have you used the construction camera? We have a camera on the courthouse.
We do?
Oh, you do? Huh.
That does the construction site.
Huh.
If you didn't know that, we'll get that to you.
Occasions we haven't had the bandwidth to support everyone.
I'll get that address to all of you so you can look at it.
That's great.
Only 3 more commissioners to go for paperless.
Yes. It's a criteria,
all right, thank you all.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Anything else? I think we're done for the day, Grassroots. We'll see everyone here tomorrow at noon.
Thank you, Grassroots.
Thanks for coming in.